Chapter 1794. The old chief would not be surprised if he heard it from someone else, but it was different when it was Jiang Pengji who said it. How could she not know Jiang Pengji's temperament? Although I can't see your expression right now, I can guess that you must be very surprised, right? Although he was asking a question, his words were full of certainty. Jiang Pengji understood him as much as the old chief knew Jiang Pengji. You Abba, I am indeed a little surprised. You don't look like someone who would do such unnecessary things. In the eyes of the idle audience, it was human nature for parents to plan for their children. It was a parent's duty. However, this judgment was not very useful in Jiang Pengji's era. The Federation did a survey. More than 73% of the people were unmarried and infertile. They would rather spend their time and energy on work, creating value, enjoying life, and accompanying their lovers. Very few people would like to raise a child and teach a baby who was like a blank piece of paper to learn about the world bit by bit. Firstly, many young people felt that they were not capable of playing the role of a good parent and could not be responsible for the other's life. Secondly, the Federation had a perfect system and organization. The quality and efficiency of teaching children were better than that of young parents. Thirdly, with the rapid development of economic civilization, young people were under great pressure to survive. Even if they were to take care of their own children, they would let the family robots take care of them. Since the introduction of the artificial incubation chamber, this trend slowly became mainstream. In the past, there were people who doubted that education without parental involvement would not produce outstanding children. Children who lacked love would have psychological defects. However, when it was put into practice, the effect was very good. Many parents had their own flaws, such as personality defects, moral defects, and violent tendencies. They taught these to their children, whether intentionally or unintentionally. Even if they subconsciously restrained themselves, humans were not perfect. It was impossible to be vigilant and restrained at all times. The family babysitting robots did not have these flaws. They always showed perfection to their children. No matter how mischievous the children were, they could teach them over and over again. They would not gradually lose patience like ordinary parents and show negative emotions to their children. Children who caused trouble could not avoid due punishment by acting coquettishly or crying. Except for a few special cases where they were born with genetic defects and could not empathize with ordinary people, most children's education was better and more efficient than ordinary parents. This kind of education had its pros and cons. The pros were obvious, but the cons were also quite obvious. Taking Jiang Pengji as an example, she resonated with the identities of the commander of the army and the lord. She knew how to love her subordinates, how to weigh the pros and cons, and how to deal with and manage the situation. This was because these were instilled in her from a young age. As a warrior, she would not abandon her comrades. As a commander, she would look at the bigger picture and do her best to protect her soldiers. As a lord, she would not disappoint everyone's hopes. However, no one had taught her how to play the role of a parent. Jiang Pengji had naturally longed for her own parents, but she had never thought that she would become another child's parent. If they didn't have this concept, they naturally wouldn't adjust their character's positioning. Instead, they would choose a character they were familiar with. For example, a lord and his subordinates, or a king and his subjects. The former dominated the latter, and that was the role of giving orders. Jiang Pengji only needed to tell them what was the right thing to do. If they encountered any difficulties, she would let them solve it themselves instead of guiding them from the side. If Jiang Pengji was at the old chief's age, she would probably use the senior and junior template. But she was not that old yet. Jiang Pengji was unfamiliar with the role of a parent. She could only explore it by herself. The old chief thought that he was going to give her some pointers, but he didn't expect Jiang Pengji to wake up first. It was impossible to expect Jiang Pengji to be enlightened by herself. There were most likely hidden secrets that others didn't know. No matter what, Jiang Pengji's change was a good thing. I didn't want to make these unnecessary arrangements, but... Jiang Pengji recalled Wei Si's previous life, and her chest was filled with irritation for no reason. But this world is different from ours. The children here are too weak. They are so weak that they can be taken away with a minor illness. Unlike the newborns in the Federation, each of them is equipped with a home care robot. Even their parents can't hurt them. Once a child came out of the artificial nursery chamber, the child's genes would be bound to a home care robot. From birth to 10 years old, the robot's protection level for the child was the highest. From 10 to 15 years old, the protection level would gradually decrease. After 18 years old, the protection level would be completely separated from the home care robot. During the protection period, even the parents could not harm the child with any malicious intent. In this era, it was impossible for a child to be beaten, scolded, or to be strangled or drowned in the toilet just because it was a girl. That was because the home care robot was equipped with a combat mode. The combat mode was created by collecting the physical and combat data of thousands of martial artists. Even Jiang Pengji, who was at her peak in her previous life, could not subdue the robot without using her ultimate skill. Not to mention ordinary people. Once the robot's protection mechanism was triggered, the lightest punishment would be to be rubbed against the ground. The most serious punishment would be having their joints dislocated. They would be prosecuted and deprived of custody and custody rights. Their reputation would be blacklisted and they would not be able to enjoy the various benefits provided by the Federation. There was also a lame joke on the internet. A netizen ranked the combat power of each family member. An 8-year-old son could not defeat his wife, and his wife could not defeat him. He could not defeat his 8-month-old daughter, and the 8-month-old daughter could not defeat her 8-day-old brother-in-law _ smiley face angle _. The younger the child, the higher the combat power of the bound home care robot, and the looser the restrictions on the use of force. This was normal for Jiang Pengji, so in her mind, babies should be the safest. But in this era, there were no home care robots. Babies were the weakest. In troubled times, they would be used as food by cruel murderers. Even the barbarians in the South wrote a cannibal rhapsody. It was a voluminous 400 to 500 words. Each word was stained with blood. They proudly said that baby's flesh was the most tender. If such people were in Jiang Pengji's era, they would have been killed on the spot by the home care robot and smashed into minced meat. Jiang Pengji was indignant before. She wanted to kill as many of such people as possible. Now that she had become a mother, her violent emotions were particularly strong. Because she could not imagine that the tender flesh that was widely discussed in the cannibal rhapsody would come from her own flesh and blood. Realizing this, Jiang Pengji would naturally learn to play the role of a home care robot and give the children the protection they deserved. Chapter 1795. Jiang Ji said it in a domineering manner. The old general was so quiet that he seemed to have disconnected. After a long while, he slowly climbed up. Your Abba, although I don't want to disturb you from showing off your domineering aura, I have something to report to you. Jiang Ji raised her eyebrows and asked, what is it? Your Abba, you may not be able to give birth to a normal child. I can't tell you the details. You mean this? Jiang Ji said, I had a hunch. It's not normal for 2 embryo sacs to only have one spiritual fluctuation. The 2 embryo sacs should be twins, but there was only one spiritual fluctuation. This meant that only one embryo sac was normal. It would make sense if one of the embryo sacs didn't grow, but it was strange if the 2 embryo sacs were growing at the same speed. Jiang Ji thought of the inside story that the old general had revealed earlier. She was already mentally prepared. According to the old general, Jiang Ji would definitely return to the Federation to continue being the commander of the army. She might even take over the position of the old marshal. She was so important that she couldn't spend her entire life in this time and space. This plane was so important, but the Federation still needed to borrow Jiang Ji had accumulated the luck from this era to survive the disaster. Then, she needed someone to take over and maintain the dynasty, so that the luck could continue to flourish and even improve. After thinking about it, Jiang Ji felt that the old general was the most likely candidate. This was because she had only met one old acquaintance so far. The old general's ability also fit the criteria. Of course, this was only her guess. When she found out that the embryo sacs were abnormal, she was even more certain. The body prepared for the old general couldn't have an owner. That was because seizing someone's body was a capital offense in the Federation. If the old general really wanted to take over the mess, he could only use a body that had no soul. It's good that it's you. After all, you're someone I know. If it's someone I don't know, I'll complain to the Federation. This world was far away from the Federation. Although it was a little backward, ambitious people could do well here. Jiang Ji didn't want someone who knew her for a long time to ruin her hard work. Even if it was a small farm, she had worked hard for many years to get it. This time, it was the old general's turn to be silent. Your Abba, you really don't mind? You're not going to ask me why I did it? Ginger. Ji Yunshu waved her hand. I trust the old man's ability. He's definitely more reliable than a nanny robot. His daughter and the old general were twin sisters, and he could even make the old general call his mother obediently. Just thinking about it made him feel so comfortable that he wanted to moan. Most importantly, with the old chief joining them, the problem of the children's education would be solved. The only thing that bothered him was that the body that the old leader wanted to use was Ginger. It was very strange that it was produced by G. I was wondering why my appetite had grown so much recently, and my appetite had even increased explosively. So it's all because of you. Your Abba, she was not going to take the blame for this. By the way, when are you coming online? Your Abba, after you give birth. I don't want to experience the feeling of coming out of the birth canal. Ginger. Ji Yi's face darkened. MMP. You make it sound like she's reluctant. No, Ginger. Ji Yunshu suddenly thought of something. If the old general came online with a new body, who would buy things for her in the future? Who knew how long the Federation would let her stay in this world? At the very least, they would have to wait until the old chief's body reached adulthood and he could take charge on his own. If that was the case, it would be at least 18 years. What was the concept of 18 years? Ginger. Ji Yunshu couldn't help but plan for her own blissful sexual life. In the future, we will not only be superiors and subordinates, but also mother and daughter. Then I'll be straightforward. Where are you now, old general? The old general asked her gently what she wanted. Ginger. Ji Yunshu said, if this is the ancient era when technology was just budding, help me buy a few hundred boxes of that. I need to stock up. The old general, Ginger. Ji Yunshu asked again, do you know the gender of the new body? The old general. Whether it's a man or a woman, you have to be responsible for yourself and your partner. It's very painful to give birth frequently, so you should buy more. I'll help you stock up. I don't know how long you'll be staying here, but it's definitely more than 18 years. It's better to be prepared. Ginger. Ji Yunshu's words were meant to tease the old general. Everyone in the 7th Division knew that the old general smoked, drank, fought, and had tattoos on his arms. However, he was an old-fashioned and serious old cadre. If she came to this era, she probably wouldn't learn from Ginger. Ji Yunshu was a dog of pride. She thought that she would be greeted with a thunderous roar from the old general, but he only replied with 5 words. Your Abba, thank you for the reminder. Ginger. Ji Yunshu. Excuse me. System notification, your friend, your Abba, has gone offline. He must have gone somewhere to do wholesale. Could it be that I've misjudged him? This guy is wearing the skin of an old cadre, but his heart is exceptionally frivolous. As she muttered, Ginger. Ji Yunshu suddenly felt waves of heat coming from her waist. It was so hot that she almost unsheathed the god-slaying saber. She looked down and realized that the source of the heat was actually the saber at her waist. She raised her hand to touch the hilt of the saber and pulled it out. She realized that the usually white and shiny blade was slightly pink. Ginger. Gee, a lot of dirty 18x content suddenly floated in her mind, such as human saber play and whatnot. I remember that the old general once called the virtual spiritual being in this saber Zai. Could it be that it's not a child but, mortals would never understand the taste of a big shot. Speaking of which, if Zixiao calls me daddy during that time. Ginger? Ji Yunshu's imagination ran wild. He'll probably break down. To achieve this achievement, who knew how many years of teaching would be needed to take this step _ smiley face angle _ ginger? Ji Yunshu could only put away this thought. The grandeur of the scholar selection examination was far grander than the graduation examination of the Golden Scale Academy. Scholars gathered in Wanzhou. Many scholars from other villages came because of its reputation, but when they stepped into Xiangyang district, they felt the embarrassment of farmers entering the city. Everywhere they looked was novel, but at the same time, they felt a sense of rejection that was out of place. Many scholars heard about how prosperous Xiangyang was when they came for the examination. But no matter how they imagined it, they always felt that the so-called prosperity was only a little more majestic and lively than the county they were in. Only when they saw it with their own eyes did they understand what it meant to be a frog in a well. Because of this, they made a lot of jokes. Wanzhou, which already had a strong learning environment, held elegant poetry gatherings everywhere. Scholars from various families were invited to exchange ideas, exchange what they needed, and at the same time, get to know each other. Many scholars from other villages thought that they could come and look down on the country bumpkins, but they didn't expect to be watched by scholars who had lived here for a long time. A certain scholar mentioned a certain unique book, saying that this unique book was a book collection of some aristocratic family and they wouldn't lend it to outsiders easily. He used a lot of connections to borrow it to read and it was very precious. He thought that he would attract the envy and flattery of his acquaintances, but in the end, many people looked at him as if he was an idiot. After asking carefully, he found out that the Golden Scale Pavilion had a complete set of books that anyone could read. Chapter 1796. The Duke of Lanting is too despicable. Such arguments were occasionally heard in the tea-houses and taverns, but the crowd did not argue with them. They thought it was a few hotheads who wanted to use such methods to become officials. It was not like there was no such example in the past. In ancient times, a scholar criticized a certain monarch in the market. The monarch did not kill the scholar for the sake of his reputation. Instead, he tied the scholar up and sent him to the monarch. The monarch asked the scholar why he criticized him. The scholar spoke with fervor and assurance. Every incident touched the monarch's heart and pointed out the hidden dangers that the monarch was most worried about. With a series of actions that were as fierce as a tiger, the scholar caught the monarch's attention. From then on, he stepped on the clouds and was promoted all the way. The monarch earned the reputation of being a kind and generous Bo-Lu. The scholar also earned the reputation of being an intelligent and resourceful horse. The story of the monarch and the minister was passed down as a legend by the later generations. With the example of their predecessors, many latecomers wanted to imitate them. However, they did not imitate them and instead became sensationalists. Moreover, there were many ways to become officials now. The scholars from poor families did not need to use such a suicidal method to gain fame. The imperial examinations were around the corner. Those who wanted to use such a method to gain fame were either stupid or stupid. Talented people were not afraid of the imperial examinations. Those who should be on the list would still be on the list. Without talent, even if they gained fame, they would only be a joke to others. How is the Duke of Lanting hateful? His friend tugged at the scholar's sleeve and corrected him. Everyone knows that she has changed her name and cut all ties with the Lu family. Now, she is using the Zhang surname bestowed upon her by the heavens. You should respectfully call her Lady Zhang. If he used the old title once or twice, it could be said that he was not used to it. However, if he still used it after the correction, it would mean that he was dissatisfied with Zhang Pengji. How precious are books! That scholar was indignant and had a pained look on his face. His friend was puzzled and echoed, "They are indeed precious." The scholar continued, "Such precious books are naturally only suitable for scholars to possess. Those peasants from all walks of life should not covet them. The Duke of Lanting does not know this. Instead, he made so many books in the Jinling Pavilion public. All kinds of filthy and smelly things can come and dirty the scent of ink for no reason. His family had quite a collection of books. Although he didn't think that his collection could compare to a noble family like the Feng family, it was more than enough to beat up a poor family. In his hometown, there were many scholars from poor families who flattered him in a roundabout way. They did not even hesitate to send their own sisters, and daughters to please him, just to borrow his family's books for a few days. He had been proud of this for many years and looked down on those who came from a poor family. No foundation was no foundation. Where was the arrogance of a scholar's character in his bowing and scraping manner? However, this sense of superiority was smashed to smithereens when he arrived in Wanzhou. He had seen many scholars from humble backgrounds spend several years in the Golden Scale Pavilion, following the lectures of the great Confucian scholars nearby. Their knowledge and experience were more than 3 streets behind him. Yesterday at the assembly, he had been ridiculed by 2 disciples from a poor family for being a frog in a well, and they had called him a country bumpkin from the countryside. He had always been the one looking down at others from above. Since when did others have the right to mock and ridicule him? The disparity was too great. He was unable to accept it. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. After going around in circles, he felt that everything was Jiang Pengji's fault. Books were owned by the aristocratic families. The poor could only bow and scrape to have the right to peep into the sea of knowledge. The commoners should be ignorant for life. This kind of extreme thinking lingered in his mind like a messy cluster of thorns, growing and spreading in his heart. Originally, he was confident that Toad Palace would win, but after coming to Wanzhou and seeing so many unscientific poor families, he suddenly felt a pain in the ass. If the poor were like this, how could those aristocratic families who had a long foundation be? The atmosphere of the imperial examinations was not proper. Asking him to take the exam with the poor was an insult to him. It was fine if he did not take the exam. He was not the only one who held this kind of thinking. The temple is small, but the wind is strong. The pond is shallow, and there are many turtles. Changxing listened and frowned. Her eyes were filled with disdain for these people. He doesn't have much ability. He doesn't reflect on himself and instead picks on others. How can he be so arrogant? Pfft, it's just a funny joke. Why does Changxing care so much? In the private room, Wan Xiu, and Changxing sat opposite each other. The room they were in was not far from the table outside, so they could hear it quite clearly. Changxing said, "I feel indignant for Brother Rongli. He actually has to compete with such a despicable person." Wan Xiu, laughed. They speak so bluntly. They may not be qualified to participate in the imperial examinations. If this kind of person is allowed to climb up, the commoners will suffer. Little did they know that the 2 of them were not the only ones who heard this. Jiang Pengji, who was in the private room next door, also heard this. She came out purely to relax. She wanted to see the commoners' lives, but she didn't expect to hear such harsh words. It's better to eliminate this kind of idiot from the beginning. Letting him enter the written exam is a waste of my paper and ink. Most of Jiang Pengji's subordinates were poor, but there were also many aristocratic families. The 2 groups got along quite well, and there were no sharp conflicts for the time being. Who knew what kind of chemical reaction would happen if such an idiot was allowed to enter? She walked back and asked Wei Ci to send people to investigate. She found that there were many idiots like this. I thought this kind of idiot was one of a kind. I didn't expect them to be assembly line products made from a mold. Jiang Pengji yawned and said sleepily, "Eliminate them by manipulating in the dark. If their character and morals are not good, they can't be used no matter how talented they are." Feng Zhen and the others agreed on the surface, but they were secretly pleased. It was fine if they didn't use their brains, but they actually fell into Jiang Pengji's hands. They really didn't know how to spell the word death. After all, this kind of idiot was in the minority. The first imperial examinations were held as scheduled. In order to uphold the principle of fairness and to promote the imperial examinations at the same time, other than the written exam, all the other events were open to the public. Of course, not everyone could come and watch this open event. I heard that Lord Jiang once attended the graduation assessment of the Golden Scale Academy students. Why is there no sign of him in the imperial examinations? Could it be that they look down on the scholars? Someone else said, wasn't Lord Jiang assassinated that time? There are many scholars in the imperial examinations. There are crooks mixed in with the honest folks. They have to consider Lord Jiang's safety. With this explanation, many people felt much more at ease. Someone else said, I heard that there will be a big change in the next imperial examinations. We haven't even finished this year's examinations and you're already thinking about the next one? Of course I'm thinking about it. If there's no next imperial examinations, how can we scholars from humble backgrounds become officials and serve the emperor? All kinds of rumors spread among the scholars. Time passed day by day. After 3 rounds of screening, only 50 people entered the court examinations. The rankings of the other scholars were out. Among the 50 people in the court examinations, more than 70% of them were scholars from the Golden Scale Academy. The students with the worst results were within the top 500. When the statistics were out, many people who were pessimistic were slapped hard in the face until their faces were swollen. Chapter 1797. On the day of the court examinations, Jiang Ji received a battle report from Zhongzhao. The insignia on the report was black. Jiang Ji Yunshu opened the letter and carefully read every word 3 times. Wen Zheng has never disappointed me, she didn't burn the letter. Instead, she put it in her sleeve. She would need it later to build momentum. Since Jiang Ji decided to have a child, she wrote a letter to Qiguan Rang at the border, asking him to take over half of Zhongzhou in the shortest time possible. Taking over half of Zhongzhou was not difficult, but Jiang Ji set a time limit for this task. Zhongzhou was in a mess because of Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen. There were no less than 20 independent feudal lords. The internal strife was more serious than in Dongqing. Nie Qing was in dire straits and had long lost control of the situation. The Nie family's assets were also taken by the side branches. The elders of the other branches also jumped out to stir up trouble. In a short year or two, the situation had evolved into the present. Jiang Ji couldn't swallow all of Zhongzhou in one go, but it wasn't difficult to divide the cake into a dozen pieces and slowly nibble it away. Qiguan Rang had this idea. He took advantage of Nie Qing's weakness and took advantage of the fact that the Nie family had little control over Zhongzhou to split them and stir up conflict among the various factions. At first, they could still control it. But later on, they were in a frenzy. Who cared about the country? Even if they wanted to control themselves, they couldn't stop Qiguan Rang and Old Man Sun from sending people to fan the flames. Jiang When Ji's letter reached Qiguan Rang, he had already decided to close the net after the autumn harvest. He had been afraid that Beiyuan and Xichang would take the opportunity to catch the cicada. In the end, he sent people to investigate and found that the situation in these 2 countries was even more exciting than he had imagined. Without this layer of worry, even if Jiang Ji didn't say anything, Qiguan Rang also wanted to petition for troops. But sending troops was one thing, timing was very important. A few months earlier and a few months later could result in a world of difference. Qiguan Rang didn't understand why Jiang Ji was in such a hurry to start the war. But he was loyal to Jiang. As long as the other party's orders weren't outrageous and reasonable, he wouldn't question them. Qiguan Rang held the letter and discussed with Sun Wen through the night, thinking about the possibility of taking over half of Zhongzhou within the stipulated time. Old Master Sun said solemnly, "Why don't we write a letter to the Lord and ask for forgiveness for a month?" It was not impossible to take down half of the Zhongzhou in such a short period of time, but it would be risky. They still had ample military supplies, so they could take the risk. It would be good if they could gain a firm foothold, but if they couldn't, I'm afraid our army wouldn't have the strength to attack this year. The punitive expedition against Zhongzhou has to be postponed to next year's autumn harvest. My lord shouldn't be aware of this. Although Old Man Sun was not a stickler to the rules and often used tricks on the battlefield, when it came to the big picture, he preferred to fight steadily and surely. Zhongzhao was already in the bag. They could drag it out until the autumn harvest before sending troops to attack. Zhongzhao had been burdened by frequent wars in the past few years. In the past 2 years, there had been full-scale wars. Their crops could not keep up with their consumption. Starting the war in autumn was when the enemy was at their most ferocious. All the feudal vassals were short of food, so why would they go all out to fight for food? If Qiguan Rang and the others sent out their troops at this time, they could fight while dragging the battle on. They would definitely win. If they sent out their troops now, they had to take some risks. Qiguan Rang understood this as well, but he knew Jiang Qin better. Ji needed this victory. Even if the other party didn't say what they needed this victory for, as a subject, he had to achieve it for the other party. Qiguan Rang's attitude was firm, and Old Man's son compromised. The two of them planned for several days and finally found a breakthrough. Old Man's son watched Qiguan Rang not sleep for several nights and had an absurd thought. Could it be that Qiguan Rang had feelings for his lord that surpassed that of a ruler and subject? Old Man's son asked in private, but Qiguan Rang flatly denied it. I don't. Don't talk nonsense. It's impossible. Old Man's son was speechless. Old Man's son was experienced and knowledgeable. He didn't believe that there was such a pure friendship between a man and a woman. The facts proved that there was. Jiang? Wasn't Ji and Qiguan Rang enough? Or should he say, Jiang? Other than Ji and Wei Ci, the feelings of all men were so pure. Smiley face angle, they didn't treat Jiang Qin as a woman at all. Ji Dexiang was a woman, and he was a straight man, so he was naturally a close friend. Qiguan Rang hadn't slept much for a few days, but he was even more energetic. He was high as if he was on steroids. I have a feeling that something good will happen if we take over half of Zhongzhao. His lord didn't fight a battle unprepared. She suddenly asked Qiguan Rang to send troops to Zhongzhao. There must be a reason. Sun Wen was speechless. Old Man's son felt that taking over half of Zhongzhao was a great thing. What could be better than this? Beiyuan and Xichang surrender to them? Unifying the 5 countries in minutes? After guessing for half the night, Old Man's son yawned and went to catch up on his sleep. He left the tactical arrangements and mobilization of troops to Qiguan Rang. I'm old, I don't have much energy. Old Man's son stretched his back and looked in the direction of Zhongzhao, deep in thought. He had dreamed of his homeland countless times and had thought of 10,000 ways to take revenge on the enemy. When this goal was about to be achieved, the old man didn't feel the joy he had imagined. Instead, he felt empty. It wasn't the emptiness of being disappointed, but the emptiness after feeling refreshed. Smiley face angle, under the careful planning, the civil and military officials cooperated well. The chess pieces that had been planted were put to use one by one. Zhongzhao was like a domino that had collapsed. They looked strong, but when they encountered an enemy that was closing in on them, not only did they fail to defend their position, but they were also completely annihilated. In just 21 days, of the 33 counties in Zhongzhao, 4 prefectures and 16 counties fell. A few days before conquering the 4th prefecture, Qiguan Rang sent a messenger to Jiangxiang. Ji Yunshu used the highest grade black emblem to send the battle report. Half of the Zhongzhao had fallen into his hands, and the first palace examination had entered its final phase. This palace examination would be called the fight of the immortals in later generations. More than half of the scholars were the cornerstones of the 2nd generation after the founding of the Jiang dynasty. They played the role of connecting the preceding and the following in creating a prosperous era. At the same time, this court examination created a record that would never be seen again. The same person was hit 4 times in a row. In later generations, the highest score in the imperial examinations was 3 yuan in a row, but this year, there was someone who passed 4 yuan in a row. In the end, the top scorer was still the girl from the Golden Scale Academy. The last question was domineering and intimidating. Feng Yi, one of the favorites to win the championship, was also suppressed by her. That was why she did not lose, but she lost in terms of momentum. In the end, Jiang Ji Yunshu named the girl as the top scorer. In the previous few rounds, this person's score had always dominated the first place. In addition to the top scorer in the graduation examination of the Golden Scale Academy, she was jokingly called the only one to pass 4 yuan in a row. Feng Yi was not the third flower this time. He had risen to the position of the second rank. The original second rank did not perform well and was ranked 6th. To be able to obtain so many talents in this imperial examination is the greatest blessing in life. According to the procedure, after a few words, it was time to go home and find their mothers, wash up, sleep, and prepare for the Qianglin banquet the next day. Chapter 1798. The 5 countries will unite and Ziwei will descend from the heavens. These words reverberated in everyone's hearts and did not subside for a long time. Congratulations to the Lord for obtaining a talent. Congratulations to the Lord for obtaining Zhongzhao. Congratulations to the Lord for having a successor. An older official stepped out. He was so excited that his hands were trembling and his eyes were filled with tears. People of his age had suffered the most. The chaotic world had tortured them for too long. He had thought that he would never see peace again. He never expected to hear such good news. The 5 countries will unite and Ziwei will descend from the heavens. The heavens are finally taking pity on the people. Jiang Ji said, all of you are pillars of the country. With all of you here, why worry that prosperity will not come? The heavens have listened to your wishes and have sent the incarnation of Ziwei into my womb. Half of Zhongzhao is in our hands. Xichang and Beiyuan are obsessed with internal strife and wasting the country's power. There is nothing to fear. Half of the 5 countries were in her hands. The rest were weak and unbeatable. If not her, who would unite the country in the future? Even the heavens had recognized her and had specially sent the incarnation of Ziwei into her womb to create an even more prosperous dynasty. In this way, who would be able to compete with her? Those who did not know the truth were fooled by her words and believed in everything she said. If it was not the will of the heavens, how could everything be so coincidental? Zhongzhao had always held strong. Before this, there was no such news. There was not even a rumor of war. They only heard that the feudal lords of Zhongzhao were enraged. The troops stationed at Zhangjiang Pass did not move and did not intervene in the internal struggles of Zhongzhao. Without any warning, on the day of the court examination's top 3, news of a great victory came from the front lines. The most mysterious thing was that the unmarried lord, who had been quiet and had a clean private life, was suddenly pregnant. It was discovered that the day before she was pregnant, she dreamed of a dragon and phoenix in her womb. One by one, it was not a big deal. But when 3 good things happened on the same day, it was not as simple as 1 + 1 + 1 is equal to 3. Did they not see that everyone was so happy they forgot their manners? Did they not see that the older officials were crying on the spot? Jiang Ji was still not pregnant. How many people were worried about her? Now, the heavens couldn't stand it anymore and sent a purple star. What did this prove? This proved that the Lord they followed was the Son of Heaven. The next emperor would also be a wise ruler. The prosperity and peace would last for at least 100 years. Those who had not experienced the tumultuous times would never be able to understand that kind of suffering and their longing for peace. Now, they no longer needed to look for plum blossoms to quench their thirst. Peace and prosperity were waiting for them at their fingertips. Everyone bowed and congratulated him, and their voices were resounding to the point it shot into the ceiling of the hall and wished for nothing more than to charge into the clouds. He was still saying, Lord, but in his heart, he was calling, His Majesty. She was the Son of Heaven. Even though she had yet to ascend to the throne, she was already a supreme ruler in everyone's hearts. In comparison, the reactions of a few insiders were more thought-provoking. Fengzhen secretly winked at Wei Ci, asking him when he got pregnant. He wanted to know if Wei Ci was cuckolded. According to his estimation, his lord and Wei Ci had been together for a long time. She was only pregnant now. This timing was very sensitive. Ask Wei Ci. He was also a hen. Ginger. Ji announced the last piece of news in front of everyone. Wei Si's confusion and shock were no less than the others. He was also kept in the dark, but Wei Si didn't feel the slightest bit sad. Thinking of Ji's attention to the situation in Zhongzhou, Wei Si knew that today's result was something she had planned for a long time. It was to build momentum for herself and the child in her womb at the same time. With such painstaking efforts, what right did Wei Si have to be unreasonable and complain about her concealment? He wasn't the slightest bit dissatisfied, only full of excitement and tenderness. Wei Si could finally fulfill the vow he made when he was reborn, to accompany her and watch her ascend to the throne of supremacy. He also knew that this child couldn't be Jiang Yan. Jiang? Ji had always thought that Wei Si would mind this and was worried that he would be stuck in the quagmire of the past. She didn't know that Wei Si wasn't that fragile. He deeply loved the pair of children from his previous life and was filled with guilt towards them. Even in his dreams, he thought about how to make up for what he owed them. However, this life was different from his previous life. If he was obsessed with his previous life, how unfair would he be to his lord and future children? In Wei Si's heart, Jiang Yan would forever be his eldest daughter, and Wei Tsong would forever be his son. The newborn child would be the third. He or she was unique, not someone's substitute or shadow. Jiang? Ji seemed to feel something. Her resolute eyes swept over him and immediately softened. What happened in the main hall today spread at an incredible speed. Some officials who scrupulously abided by their duties and didn't attend the court examination were so shocked that their jaws dropped. Wanzhou was in a state of celebration. Is what you said true? Bai Yuexia, who had just given birth, grabbed the maid's wrist with all her might, almost scaring her precious baby into tears. The maid endured the pain, but the joy on her face came from the bottom of her heart. First Lady, it's true, it's really true. Bai Yuexia lifted the blanket and hurriedly said, quickly wash me up and put on makeup. I'm going to congratulate my lord. The maid and the wet nurse were shocked and hurriedly pulled Bai Yuexia back to prevent her from running out and catching a cold. Women had to go into confinement after giving birth. If they didn't take good care of her, she would suffer from confinement sickness. She would suffer when she got older. Bai Yuexia didn't believe this. She was in good health now. If Zhang Ping hadn't stopped her and her father had written a letter to her asking her to pay attention to her confinement recovery, she wouldn't have obediently stayed in bed. The weather was too stuffy now. Bai Yuexia hadn't left the house since giving birth. She hadn't washed her hair or taken a bath. Her bed was smelly. Most of the confinement has passed. My body has long since recovered. Don't worry about it. Bai Yuexia's heart was as hard as iron. She didn't listen to advice at all. She did things in a hurry and couldn't be stopped. Quickly prepare hot water. I want to wash up. I can't let my lord smell something strange. How could she not go and congratulate her on such a joyous occasion? She hadn't noticed it before, but now she felt that everything smelled bad. Her hair was itchy, and her pajamas had turned into yellow dried vegetables. The maids and old women couldn't stop her. Zhang Ping, the only person who had some authority, wasn't here, so they could only do as she said with bitter faces. When Zhang Ping stepped through the door, Bai Yuexia's foot bumped into him. Zhang Ping was speechless. Did the news spread so fast? Not only did Bai Yuexia know about it, but the commander of the troops stationed outside Xiangyang district also knew about it. Jiang Nongqin confirmed with the messenger 3 times in a row before she dared to believe the good news she heard. The 5 countries will unite, and the heavens will send Ziwei, Jiang Nongqin murmured several times. As she spoke, her eyes were filled with tears. She was so lucky to have the opportunity to see her lord rule the world in her lifetime. Jiang Nongqin had followed her since she was still a noble scholar in Hejin County. She was the one who pulled Jiang Nongqin out of the swamp of despair and taught her how to create her own life step by step. She hadn't reached the pinnacle yet, but the joy of the 3 joyous events was no less than that of reaching the pinnacle. Chapter 1799. This is what it means to have the outcome set in stone. Huang Song sat on the porch and watched his son and daughter study. With his beloved wife by his side, he could be considered a winner in life. The warm family time was ruined by Jiang Ji's news broke. Huang Song was stunned for a while, and then a relieved smile appeared on his face. He raised his hand to rub his youngest daughter's hair and murmured, "Time really flies. Madam, in another 10 years, our generation will be old, and the world will belong to the next generation of young people." Chi Chaolan raised her hand to cover Huang Song's hand and playfully played with his fingers. It's been more than 10 years. There's still a long way to go. Are you admitting to being old already? Huang Song said, "You have to admit that you're getting old. The iron tree that hasn't blossomed or borne fruit for 10,000 years is now bearing fruit. With such a mother and such a prestigious background, your future is destined to be extraordinary. I, your husband, would like to see time pass a little faster and see what young people are capable of." Follow Jiang Ji's footsteps to unify the world were nearing, and Huang Song and the others were slowly withdrawing from the stage. Hearing the loneliness in her husband's voice, Chi Chaolan couldn't help but stroke his shoulder to comfort him. "Lang Jun, don't blame me for that." If Chi Chaolan had not used herself and their child to persuade Huang Song to stay, Huang Song would probably have committed suicide in that battle. To him, dying before he was defeated was not necessarily a bad thing. If that was the case, they wouldn't have to remember that they were losers for years and years. The winner would walk further and further away from them. If Huang Song did not live well, Chi Chaolan would also feel guilty. Huang Song said, "What nonsense are you spouting? How could your husband be so narrow-minded?" In the beginning, it was indeed inconvenient. For example, when he went to the Golden Scale Academy to pick up his wife and children, he was stopped by the gatekeeper. If he was still a duke, who would dare to stop him? However, after so many years, Huang Song had gotten used to it and thought things through. Everyone had their own ambitions. Staying with his wife and children might not necessarily lead a blissful life. Ascending to the 9 heavens might not necessarily lead a smooth journey. It was lonely at the top. Once a person's position changed, changes would follow. He only hoped that his young friend could still maintain his original intentions after he became a 9-5, and that everything around him would not change with the change of his identity. If he really wanted to talk about guilt, "Your husband feels a little guilty towards Madam," Huang Song said abruptly, causing Chi Chaolan to look at him in confusion. He smiled. Back then, Meng Zhan wanted to adopt a girl from the same clan as his daughter and give her to me as a concubine. "Madam, do you remember what you said?" Chi Chaolan had an awkward expression. She covered her sleeves and smiled. "It's been so many years. How can I still remember?" Huang Song said, "Madam has forgotten, but your husband still remembers." At that time, Chi Chaolan had threatened Huang Song with a dagger. If Huang Song dared to take a concubine, she would dare to divorce him and keep a handsome man. At that time, Chi Chaolan's aura had soared to 2.8 meters. Huang Song was so scared that he almost knelt down. "What you, Huang Bogeo, can do, I, Chi Chaolan, can't." Lu Shi was able to become a marquis as a woman, and I have 3,000 elites under my command. Can't I do the same and start from scratch? When the time comes, when I become a feudal lord, why can't I have 3 husbands and 4 attendants? Huang Bogeo, I have the support of my maternal brothers, and I have a famous master. I have learned the art of war from my father since I was a child. If it were not for the limitation of being a woman, would have joined the army by now. Do you really think that I am a housewife who guards her own backyard? Do you think I can or can't do it? Every word was vivid in her ears. Now that she thought about it, it was indeed Huang Song who had held her back. She had the ability, but she did not have the opportunity to see the wider world. She was confined to the backyard to guard her own backyard. Marrying him was probably the worst decision Chi Chaolan had ever made in her life. However, Huang Song was still grateful that Chi Chaolan had caught a glimpse of him back then. From then on, she fell in love with him and insisted on marrying him. Speaking of which, Huang Song asked Chi Chaolan, Madam, do you think your husband is as handsome as before? Chi Chaolan raised her eyebrows and asked, what do you think, Lang Jun? His face was twice the size of a young man, and his double chin was showing. Thinking about how Huang Song was already in his 30s, it was common for middle-aged men to put on weight. Chi Chaolan did not despise him. Huang Song took a deep breath. His belly had yet to shrink, and he suddenly felt depressed. He still did not believe the words of those famous men. What did they say about being plump and fat being beautiful? It was all nonsense. I'm already middle-aged, and I still have to worry about whether my old face will be despised by my old wife. Sigh, Huang Song made up his mind to lose weight, and invited his friend, Feng Ju, to join a middle-aged fitness group. Feng Ju rejected him. He was as handsome as before, and the older he got, the more charming he became. Did he still need to lose weight? Huang Song clutched his wounded little heart and left. Feng Ju looked at the deserted courtyard, and his eyes flashed a little absent-mindedly. For some reason, while the people outside were celebrating and walking the streets to share their joy, he felt an indescribable loneliness. Madame Feng Ju said gently, Lang Jun, why are you standing in the corridor? The sky is getting dark, and the courtyard is very humid. I'm thinking about something, but I can't figure it out no matter how hard I try. Madame said, then leave it for tomorrow to think about. Feng Ju asked her, what if you can't figure it out tomorrow, and never in the future? Madame said, then don't think about it. It's destined that you won't be able to figure it out. Why waste time? Isn't it better to cherish the moment? These words made Feng Ju feel enlightened, as if the fog in front of him had completely dissipated. Yes, Madame is still the most thorough. Madame? When the news came, Lu Shi and Lu Zhao were drinking tea in the corridor. Those attending the court examination that day were all important officials. Lu Shi and Lu Zhao, one retired, and the other was a commoner. Neither of them could be present. Lu Zhao heaved a sigh of relief. Sister finally has a child. Our son is safe. Lu Shi took a sip of tea and said, safe? Not necessarily. Lu Zhao was almost choked to death by his own father. What? How could it still be dangerous? Why was it so difficult for him to keep his life? Lu Shi looked at the splendid scene in the courtyard. His dark eyes seemed to be shrouded in a thick fog, and no one could see through his heart. The only person who could do it was long gone. Lu Shi said abruptly. The wind is about to blow. The weather is about to change. The weather is about to change? Lu Zhao looked at the sky and said in surprise, the sky is quite normal, and there was no mention of strong wind, heavy rain, or fog tonight. As he murmured, he suddenly stopped. The wind, the weather, was it the sky above their heads, or, father? Lu Zhao suddenly put down the teacup. The sound of it clattering was particularly clear at this moment. Lu Shi got up from the mat and said faintly, no matter who wins or loses, don't get involved. When gods fight, they don't care about family. Lu Zhao's chest was beating violently, and an ominous premonition spread throughout his body. Father, are you going to deal with sister? Lu Zhao clenched his fists. Lu Shi suddenly laughed out loud, why would I? I'm just like you, watching the fight between the gods. Chapter 1800. Father, you have to remind my sister. Lu Zhao looked into Lu Shi's deep eyes and stammered. His voice gradually trailed off. No matter how slow he was, he knew he had said something he shouldn't have, not to mention that Lu Zhao wasn't stupid at all. Lu Shi's deep eyes fell on his son and he asked him in a relaxed tone, as if he was asking about the weather, remind what? Remind, that my sister might be in danger. After all, she's been very kind to us all these years. Before he could finish his sentence, Lu Zhao noticed that his father's eyes had become particularly scary, giving him an unusual amount of pressure. Lu Zhao didn't expect his father to have such a dangerous side. On second thought, if Lu Shi was really an ordinary scholar, he wouldn't have been able to suppress the local bullies in Hu County, let alone become famous in Dongqing. Lu Shi was still ruthless, but he had been cultivating himself and had been hiding it well. People gradually forgot that he used to be a ruthless person that everyone was afraid of. In the face of such a strong pressure, Lu Zhao's eyes revealed an indescribable complexity. Being neutral can still benefit from both sides, but once you choose a side, it'll be fine if you win, but it'll be beyond redemption if you lose. Lu Shi withdrew his aura and returned to normal, as if his earlier aura was just a hallucination. Won't my sister blame me? Lu Shi thought of Jiang Ji. Ji sneered, she knows what she's doing. The system was a gloomy guy, planning before taking action. Other than being stupid when it was sliced, it was still very good at other things. Even if Lu Shi hated the system to death, he knew that the system was cunning and wouldn't fail so easily. As long as it didn't kill the system, it would always come back and its revenge would be even more ruthless than before. Jiang Ji wasn't afraid of the system, but not the people she cared about. When Wei Ci was possessed by the system and committed suicide, didn't he almost die? Now, not only was there Wei Ci, but there was also an unborn child. The baby was even more fragile than Wei Ci. But Ji had to protect them. The worst decision your sister has ever made is probably to get pregnant at this time. The more weaknesses she has, the easier it is for the enemy to deal with her. Lu Shi sighed. Once Wei Ci or the child falls into the enemy's hands. What do you think she'll do? Maybe she shouldn't have tried to harm Wei Ci in the first place and let the system know her weakness. Lu Zhao was speechless. Father, it seems like you were the one who asked your son to hasten his growth. Now, he was criticizing her for getting pregnant too quickly and at the wrong time. This was too double standard. Lu Shi sneered. Do you think she made up her mind to have a child because of you? He has already made his decision. It has nothing to do with you. What was this kid thinking? Did he really think he was Jiang? Ji is very influential. Lu Zhao, he was probably her biological father. But Lu Shi changed the topic. It's hard to say if this isn't her plan to lure the snake out of its hole. It was just a simple sentence, but Lu Zhao felt a chill run down his spine. To lure a snake out of its hole, there must be a bait to attract that snake. If it was really intentional, then wasn't she using her weakness as bait? Lu Shi sneered and said, "You're not hopelessly stupid. She did treat you well, but no matter how good she is still a bad woman." Did they not see Gu Zhen in the backyard? Gu Zhen had stepped on her bottom line. She destroyed her feelings and tore apart the facade of warmth that had existed for many years without a second word. In the eyes of outsiders, she did not treat Gu Zhen badly at all, and it was indeed so. She was a filial daughter all these years. She's too nice. She's so nice that Gu Zhen has forgotten her identity and hers. She really thought there was a mother-daughter relationship between the two of them. Had Gu Zhen never thought about the consequences of failure? She had thought about it, but she was too confident that nothing bad would happen to her even if she was caught. Even if her deeds were exposed, she would still be the future Empress Dowager. Ji wouldn't really deal with her. Based on this foundation, Gu Zhen had the courage to take risks time and time again. In the end, Jiang Xiang was Ji had set up a counterattack. Lu Shi said, "Remember, she is Jiang. Ji was not Lu Shi. She can treat you like a younger brother, but there is no real brotherly love between you." From this point of view, Lu Shi and Jiang Qinghe were in the same boat. Ji was the same kind of person. No matter how loving and filial the two of them were, outsiders were moved by their atmosphere, but their minds were still clear, and they were not corrupted by the so-called feelings. Gu Min was the only person in Lu Shi's life who had been bewitched and willingly fallen for it. Lu Shi understood Jiang. With Ji's personality, he would remind his stupid son, his mind was clear, and he would always remember this iron rule. Lu Shi smiled evilly. "Do you believe that if you can be the bait to lure the snake out of its hole, she will push you out?" Lu Zhao was speechless. Of course she would. But, sister is not a cold-hearted person. If she did this, she would definitely have a thorough plan. She wouldn't really let the bait enter the snake's stomach. Lu Shi sighed. Of course. Otherwise, wouldn't she be the one who lost? It was understandable rationally, but it was unacceptable emotionally. This was the situation. Regardless of who Jiang was. Who was the bait that Ji had pushed out? When the bait found out the truth, it would be hard to accept. Lu Zhao said, maybe, we're thinking too much. Lu Shi snorted and didn't answer. Thinking too much? No, he would only think that he was thinking too little. Jiang? Ji had fought with the system so many times and even had the upper hand. He should have known that this woman was not a good person. Lu Shi didn't believe that there was no consideration of luring the snake out of its hole during this pregnancy. Let's wait and see. Once they have a winner, we'll have peace. Lu Shi sneered. You don't have to worry about your sister. Her life will not be in danger. As for you, the only person I'm worried about now is you. I'm afraid you won't be able to die in peace. Whether the system won or Jiang. Ji Xingli, Lu Shi couldn't live without the feelings of the system. No matter how much the system despised him, it still needed to absorb him to increase its strength. Jiang? Needless to say, Ji now had a human body, but he could faintly sense that Jiang. The knife at Ji's waist was very scary. It didn't matter to Lu Shi who won or lost. Sigh, when the gods fight, the mortals suffer. Lu Shi felt that he could still save them. At the same time, Jiang? Ji sneezed several times in a row. She rubbed her nose and said, that B** starred is talking behind my back. She sneezed one after another and couldn't stop. If this continued, she wouldn't be able to hold in her pee. Wei Ci said faintly, now that the master has made such a fuss, how could there be fewer people talking behind your back? Due to the backward communication in this era, Jiang? Ji would definitely dominate the hot search list. It was guaranteed that the 1st to the 50th would be related to her. He wasn't the first person to know the good news. Chapter 1801. Ginger? Ji said, there must be more good words outside. I sneezed so much. Ah, yawn. They must be saying bad things about me. Wei Ci, he wanted to say that with his lord's ability to attract hatred, she would probably say half of the good and half of the bad. Didn't she have any idea what was going on? Countless gentry families that had been suppressed by her secretly cursed her bad luck. However, her marketing skills were outstanding. Not only did she give herself the title of the Child of Destiny, she even gave the child in her womb the title of the reincarnation of the North Star. Once the child was born, no matter how many more children they had in the future, they would not be able to defeat this one. The halo was too powerful. Not to mention fighting for it, they probably couldn't even think of fighting for it. But, will it be bad for the child if he's too famous? Wei Ci was afraid that he would carelessly praise the child to death while raising her. Moreover, the one who would be praised to death was his own mother. That would be a pain in the ass. Ginger? Ji twirled the toothpick and bared her teeth. What's wrong with it? Children should be cool. Otherwise, why would I call you my child? Wei Ci, if the child were to die from excessive praise, the mother would be the main culprit. After all, everything is unpredictable, just like Wei Tsong in his previous life. Wei Ci did not want this child. To be precise, he did not expect to have this child. It would be fine if it was a girl, but if it was a boy, not only would it shake Her Highness Jiang Yan's legitimate status, but it would also threaten His Majesty's life. The situation in the court could not tolerate such a legitimate son. When he found out that this child was specially born by Her Majesty to continue the Wei family's lineage, Wei Ci's emotions were so complicated that he could not be sorted out. Of course, the child could not be ruled out as Her Majesty's entrapment, but half of it was planned for Wei Ci. With this thought in mind, Wei Ci felt that it was a great gift from the heavens and did not dare to ask for anything else. He wanted to raise Wei Tsong well. Other than status and honor, Wei Ci had done everything he could. She hoped that he would spend the rest of his life as a famous scholar, doing what he wanted to do and traveling around the world. They didn't have to endure the pain of separation in a chaotic world, and they didn't have to endure the predicament of hunger and cold. Life was like floating clouds, free and unrestrained. Now that he thought about it, Wei Ci had been too subjective and had forgotten that Wei Tsong was not him. What he gave the child might not be what the child wanted. Now, my lord, in this life, I only want this one. The second one was destined to be the threat of boss. Incense offerings and whatnot could go to hell. In his previous life, Wei Ci did not cling to the family line. Otherwise, he would not have been targeted by Her Majesty when he was still single at the age of 30, right? With such a damned fate that cursed his entire family, he would have long laid flat and let fate trample all over him. If another Wei Tsong appeared, they would still end up with the same outcome. Ginger. After Ji Yunshu finished picking her teeth, she told him some bad news. This is a twin. You can't just have one. Wei Ci was speechless. Ginger. Ji said, didn't I say that the dragon and phoenix in my dreams entered my arms? No matter if the dragon and phoenix were male or female, there would definitely be two. Wei Ci said with difficulty, dragon and phoenix entering one's bosom. Isn't that just nonsense, my lord? There was no such dream. Ginger. Ji Yunshu nodded. The dream is nonsense, but the essence is real. Wei Ci was confused again. Since ancient times, there has never been a twin who inherited the throne. They looked exactly the same. What a good basic condition for usurping the throne. If they encountered a damned emperor or prince who swapped identities, wouldn't the imperial court and imperial harem be in a mess? If one was a dragon and one was a phoenix, it would be a good omen. What if the two children were of the same gender? There were similar records in the past. When an imperial concubine gave birth to twin dragons, one would drown. Otherwise, both would lose the right to inherit the throne. Ginger. Ji said indifferently, then let's set an example with these two children. The old chief had to take a fancy to a small farm or something. It was a dream to expect a woman who ran around the world to stay in a strange and backward ancient world for the rest of her life. It was impossible to fight for the throne. Ji Yunshu was afraid that the old chief would tie her daughter up and tie her to the dragon throne to threaten her. Smiley face angle, ever since she deduced that the old chief might come, Ginger. Ji Yunshu secretly made a plan. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It was rare to be able to exploit this fellow. If she didn't take the opportunity to take advantage of him, she was afraid that she wouldn't have another chance in the future. Thinking that her daughter would have to live under the shadow of the great devil in the future, Ginger. Ji Yunshu pitied this child. Wei Ci said, but, Ginger. Ji Yunshu stroked her belly and said, don't worry. We have to believe in miracles. Wei Ci, not at all smiley face angle, be Ginger. When Ji Yunshu's news reached the troops stationed in Nanxing and Zhongzhao's frontline, everyone had different reactions. Fu Wang was calm. Jiang. Ji Yunshu was unmarried and had no children. This commander had never joined the army to hasten births. He only recognized this one lord. The baby young lord was nothing. It didn't matter whether he had or not. When Yang Si received the news, he was bathing in the bathtub. In his excitement, he knocked over the bathtub. When he got up from the ground, he opened the door and ordered the butler to prepare food and wine to celebrate. The butler looked at the fair and smooth old master. His expression was indescribable. What kind of look is that? Your old master is still strong. Yang Si slammed the door, blocking the old butler's line of sight. The old butler, he couldn't help but ask a question from the depths of his soul. What was in the old master's head all day? Yang Tao, Yan Lin, and the others were slightly shocked, but their reactions were still calm. Is the news reliable? Yang Tao had been busy training the troops all day. He was so tired that he was sweating all over. He didn't even bother to take off his armor. The smell was so strong that only his wife and good friend Yan Lin didn't mind. He sat cross-legged and massaged his sore feet. Yan Lin said, reliable. The news was sent by Qian Su, who had escorted his wife and children to Wanzhou. How could it not be reliable? Yang Tao accidentally popped his blister. The pain made him grimace, but he felt good afterward. Isn't that a good thing? With a young lord, the people will feel at ease. Otherwise, her position will be shaken sooner or later. Yan Lin glanced at his good friend who was getting more and more impolite. He said coldly, "You're quite open-minded." Yang Tao said, "What else can I do? Betray her?" Yan Lin, he pressed down on the blue veins on his forehead. "Zhengzi, don't get too close to those boorish country bumpkins. Listen to Yang Tao's elegant words. What kind of accent is that?" For Yan Lin, who was fastidious about pronunciation and had terminal OCD, this was torture. If this went on, their friendship would be over. Among the crowd, only Qiguan Rang had the most unusual reaction. He ran to the tower with a few jars of wine and drank for the whole night. Drunk, he was carried down and huddled in his bed in the middle of the night. The next day, when Qiguan Rang recalled how drunk he was, he looked a little hopeless. Old Master Sun didn't expose him. He asked, "Did you get what you wanted?" Qiguan Rang, who had always been gloomy and cold, smiled. "Not yet." "Not yet?" Qiguan Rang said, "The world hasn't been unified yet. It's not perfect." The world had been unified. She hadn't ascended to the throne yet. It wasn't perfect. After ascending to the throne, the Golden Age hadn't arrived yet. Chapter 1802. This year was of great significance. It was destined to be recorded in the annals of history and leave a strong mark in the long river of history. Whether it was Jiang Ji's feeling of pregnancy, the purple star from heaven, the loss of half of Zhongzhou in more than 20 days, or the successful completion of the first imperial examination, this batch of scholars officially entered the official career. In a sense, it could almost be regarded as the beginning of a new era. Later generations could peek at a part of this special era from the history books, but those who lived in this era experienced everything firsthand. "Brother Rongli, I really can't bear to part with you." Tenli Pavilion outside the city, Changxing was not shy at all as she wrapped her arms around Feng Yi's neck. Her eyes were rippling with reluctance. "I still don't understand why Lord Jiang sent you so far away. What's the difference from being sent to the border?" Feng Yi raised her hand to steady Changxing's waist. Her hand was almost scalded by the touch of her waist. "Nonsense. You're so shameless in broad daylight." Although it was a scolding, her tone was gentle and doting. Her lips were curled into a faint warm smile. "How am I shameless? We are a legitimate fiancé. There are many bolder Langjun and his wife in Wanzhou. Why can't I hug you?" Changxing wanted to hang on to him. Feng Yi was the top scorer of this imperial examination, but she was sent to the extremely distant border. How could the conditions there compare to Wanzhou? In other times, this would be the place where the demoted officials would be sent to. Thinking of this, Changxing was even sadder. She didn't know how Feng Yi would be tempered by the border environment after her 4-year term. Feng Yi smiled. Lord Jiang naturally has her considerations for making such arrangements. Now that the world is settled, the people on this vast land are her people. Didn't she nurture the students of the Golden Scale Academy for so many years so that we can benefit the people of the world? There's no reason for Wanzhou to be prosperous while the people of other states and counties suffer. Lord Jiang sent us there to let the people of those places live a good life." Changxing said, "You speak a lot of great principles, but you don't know how many people are watching." Feng Yi smiled faintly as she recalled Jiang Fei. She recalled the scene of Jiang Ji summoning batch after batch of scholars. She spoke earnestly of her plans. The more outstanding the students, the more impoverished and suffering they would be sent to for a 4-year term. If they could endure the hardships and benefit the local people, it would not be difficult for them to be promoted in the future, and their official careers would also be smooth. If they didn't want to or had a reason to stay away, they could also find a job nearby, but the position would definitely not be high. After all, the positions in Wanzhou were basically saturated, and there weren't many high-ranking positions in the neighboring prosperous prefectures and counties. Even if there were good positions, it would not be given to newcomers like them who had just entered their official careers. This year's top scholar, Lu Zhou, took the initiative to choose a remote place. That place was next to Fengyi, and it was even more barren. Don't you feel wronged? Perhaps it was because she was pregnant, but Lord Jiang was very patient that day. His words were also very gentle. Lu Zhou said, Mr. Jiang has spent a lot of money to cultivate me. You have spent more than 10 years of effort. A drop of water should be returned with a spring of water. If Lord Jiang needs it, this lowly official will go. Moreover, I have been taught by the headmaster of the academy for many years. I am always worried about the people and always look forward to doing my bit for them. Now that he was fortunate enough to help the people at the border, what grievances did he have? This lowly official entered officialdom to assist Lord Jiang and benefit the people. The people in prosperous places do not need an inexperienced newcomer like me to cause trouble, but the people at the border do. This involved a problem of pursuit. If entering officialdom was to pursue fame and fortune, it was naturally best to stay in a prosperous place, where they would suffer less and earn more. At the same time, because they were newcomers, there was little room for them to play, and they would be buried for no reason. If entering officialdom was to benefit the people and share the burden of the king, where would they go if they didn't go to be an official where they were needed? Lu Zhou didn't think Jiang Ji's arrangement was to send them away. Don't doubt it, she was such a brainless fan. Which girl from the female class didn't like Lord Jiang? After Lu Zhou said everything, the expressions of the other people in the same department were a little subtle. Some people were willing to be transferred to other places to shine, while others, after hesitating, wanted to stay closer because of their parents, health, and other reasons. Everyone had their own aspirations, and they couldn't be forced. Jiang Ji also knew how desolate and difficult those places were, so she assigned each of them with guards and a special channel to submit letters. Their letters would be delivered to Jiang as soon as possible. On Ji's desk. Go ahead and do it. As long as it is beneficial to the people and the country, I will support it. Jiang Ji hesitated for a moment, then added a sentence. No matter what kind of stinky power you are facing, remember, the person standing behind you is me. Feng Yi collected his thoughts and smiled. If they want to watch the show, then so be it. How can the sparrows know the ambitions of the great? Changxing smiled. Yeah, they are a bunch of sparrows with no vision. No wonder Lord Jiang taught them a lesson over and over again. Feng Yi hesitated for a moment, then hugged her waist and pulled her into his arms. For years later, I will come back and marry you. Changxing said, for years, it just so happens that I have graduated from the academy. Maybe I will look for you first. Time always passed very quickly, and it was time to set out on the road. Changxing hugged his waist and said angrily, you are not allowed to flirt when you are an official. Not women, not men. Yes, it's yours, Feng Yi comforted her. Study hard in the academy, don't neglect your studies. Changxing said, just watch, the next top scholar will be me. Feng Yi hugged her for the last time, turned over and got on the horse. He waved the horsewhip and went on the official road. Realizing that Changxing's gaze was still on him, Feng Yi waved the horsewhip hard. The breeze blew his sleeves, leaving the brightest color in the most beautiful age. Similar scenes were happening everywhere. This group of scholars went to a remote place to be an official without a word of complaint. Among them, the majority were students from the Golden Scale Academy. Those who secretly mocked them felt bored and gradually shut their mouths. In many people's eyes, going to a remote place to be an official was demeaning. How many officials in the previous dynasty died on the way to being demoted? These young and vigorous scholars ignored this point and resolutely went on their way, which made many people sigh. If someone paid attention, they would most likely find that these scholars were mostly from humble families. When these scholars return, the gentry will have a headache. Jiang It was not scary that the important officials around Ji were from humble families. What was scary was that most of the middle and lower levels were from humble families. When the Jiang dynasty was established, the humble families would not be at a disadvantage in the fight between the gentry and the commoners. It would most likely maintain a stable situation. Master Yuanjing was pleased that his students had such a high level of understanding. Of course, this did not exclude Jiang. Ji's words, "The person standing behind you is me," were too passionate. It made these young people's blood boil. The great scholar Wan Xian had aged a lot these years, but his spirit, qi, and spirit were more vigorous than before. Chapter 1803. Grass Snake Gray Line, thousands of miles long. It seemed like a bold move, but it actually contained deep meaning and concerns. When she founded the Golden Scale Pavilion and the Golden Scale Academy, she did it under the pressure of the aristocrats. Everyone thought that she only wanted to promote the poor. Although the aristocrats were angry, they did not realize the current situation. Who would have thought that one after another, in the end, everything would be linked to each other and everyone would be trapped? Of course, this method also required charisma. Jiang Ji undoubtedly had this quality. If I can see these children bring a different kind of vitality to the world in my lifetime, I will have no regrets in this life. Yuanjing did not teach his students how to pursue fame and fortune. In the end, it was all about one word: people. Benefiting the people, not for their own selfish desires. It was just that it was too difficult to achieve this. People's selfish desires could not be controlled by external forces. What Master Yuanjing could do was to try his best to instill his own ideas in his students and set an example. He had taught for many years and never became an official. It was also because of his unique stubbornness and perseverance. Wan Xian laughed and said, "I still have a long life." These people were all strong. It would not be a problem to work hard for another 20 to 30 years. What, have no regrets in this life? There was only hope when one was alive. Wan Xian fled Zhongzhou in a sorry state. Now half of Zhongzhou was in Jiang Ji's hands, he could go back in glory. As the midsummer arrived, Jiang Ji's popularity was pushed to another peak. Others racked their brains for her, but she lived a comfortable life as a pregnant woman. "TSK, the young master in my belly is more important than me." Wei Ci said, "Why do you say so, my lord?" "Of course, my lord is more important than the young master." Jiang Ji said, "In the past, when I was lazy, you would dig 3 feet into the ground to find me. Now, you are fighting for work. The difference in treatment is so big." Everyone was fighting to work overtime. Ji's slight movement of the bamboo slips would attract countless worried gazes. If she had known that pregnant women would feel so good, she would have given birth to a few when she was free. Wei Ci said, "Pregnant women should not work hard. The meaning of the child in my lord's belly is different. They naturally value it more." Those in the know knew that the child was artificial. Those who did not know would think that it was a pregnancy. If the child was accidentally given by Jiang Ji Lang was gone, wouldn't everyone be worried about the wrath of heaven? Ginger Ji said, "I don't care. You are treating me differently." She was pregnant, not a cripple. If they didn't allow this or that, did they still have her as their lord in their eyes? Ginger Ji's zodiac was that of a donkey. Instead of walking when led, he would retreat when beaten. The more Feng Zhen and the others tried to stop her from working, the more she insisted on going. Not only did he have to do a lot of things, but he also had to work overtime. "I love work, work makes me happy." Everyone, he deeply suspected that the Lord was having a fake pregnancy. That's hard to say. Feng Zhen looked at his lord, who was jumping up and down, and then thought about how other pregnant women behaved like porcelain dolls when they were pregnant. He suddenly felt a headache coming on. She was really pregnant. She was worried that her lord would lose the child. What about a fake pregnancy? Not only would he be upset, but the others would also be so angry that they would find noodles to hang themselves. As time passed, Fengzhen became more and more worried, and the more worried he became, the balder he became. Where did his lord's pregnant belly go? Where did my lord hide her pregnant belly? She was 4 to 5 months pregnant, so she should at least have some small hills, right? Where's the lord? Pig trotters. Complaining was one thing, but Fengzhen wouldn't voice his worries, lest they waver. Because of Jiang? The artificial halo that Ji created for the child was too big. Everyone's eyes were focused on her belly. If there were rumors that the pregnancy was fake, when she gave birth to the child in the future, there would be people among the people who would say that the child wasn't her biological child, but that she had adopted it to cover up her lie. Fengzhen's worries were obviously unnecessary. With Wei Ci sparing no effort to promote the child as a God-sent child and different from ordinary children, who would blindly compare? If the God-sent child was like an ordinary child, then they would feel that it was unreal. Fengzhen, Wei Ci was shameless. It was fine if it was others, but as the biological father, how could Wei Ci not know whether the child was conceived by instinct or artificially made? Jiang? Ji's unprecedented enthusiasm for work erupted. During this period, she also paid close attention to the work of the scholars who were sent abroad. After all, it was a remote and desolate place, a place far away from the emperor. It was hard to guarantee that there weren't any daring people who bullied them. Of course, she also had to pay attention to these scholars to prevent them from losing themselves in an unrestrained place. Fortunately, these young people didn't disappoint her. Their methods were slightly immature, but they were growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Other than that, Jiang? Ji was still most concerned about the situation in Zhongzhou. Taking down half of the country in just over 20 days was very impressive, but it didn't mean that such a strong momentum could be maintained forever. Qiguan Rang and the others also realized the drawbacks and had been adopting a steady approach these days. They had to first stand firm and stabilize their foundation before moving forward. Qiguan Rang was the type of person who would go wild when he could, but when he wasn't, he would fight steadily and defend himself like a hedgehog. The feudal lords of Zhongzhou couldn't do anything to him at all. Instead, Qiguan Rang took advantage of them. Among them, the Nia family of Zhongzhou was also on its last legs. Among the few feudal lords that still existed in Zhongzhou, the overall strength of the Nia family could no longer be ranked. Speaking of which, it was quite a pity. Their original master, Nia Qing, had experienced several internal rebellions in the Nia family and disappeared during the last rebellion. Sun Wen and Qiguan Rang were behind these rebellions. With the fall of the Nia family, the feudal lords of Zhongzhou completely lost their backbone. That was why Qiguan Rang and the others had taken advantage of them. However, this wasn't enough. Old Master Sun Wen asked Qiguan Rang, "What are you calculating?" Qiguan Rang replied, "Calculating the hour." Hour? Craning his neck to take a look, Old Master Sun Wen's expression became more subtle. If he wasn't mistaken, Qiguan Rang was calculating the hour of his lord's pregnancy and delivery. What are you trying to do? Old Master Sun Wen was a little confused. Even though he was experienced and knowledgeable, he couldn't understand Qiguan Rang's operation. Qiguan Rang said, "Before the young lord is born, I want to take down the other half of Zhongzhou." Having only half of Zhongzhou was inauspicious. Taking down the other half before the child was born would make it a whole. This was a good sign. Sun Wen was speechless. Had Qiguan Rang ever considered the elderly? No, he hadn't. He only considered the lord and the young lord. Even his own father wasn't as dedicated as him. Old Master Sun thought of how Dongqing and Nanqing had all closed down and only Zhongzhou was still in full swing. He suddenly felt like he had shot himself in the foot. Back then, Fengzhen and the others had worked themselves to death and fought battles everywhere. They weren't as carefree as he was. Looking back now, he suddenly realized that the arrows in his heart were the flags he had set back then. Qiguan Rang still felt that it wasn't enough. He sent people to Xichang and Beiyuan to investigate. Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be defeated. Chapter 1804. As the months slowly grew longer, Jiang Pengji's health improved. Ji Yunshu's pregnant belly was still not out, but no one dared to slack off. Her status was now on par with Wei Si's daughter. Ginger. Ji could not help but complain, "National treasure panda, I'm now the only humanoid national treasure. I'm not happy at all." As he rubbed the panda girl darling's chin and the white fur on her head, an indescribable loneliness welled up in his heart. Other people had all kinds of pregnancy symptoms, but only she was strange. She really wanted to work, and no one could stop her. If she didn't work, she would feel uncomfortable all over. Every day, he was so energetic that he had nowhere to vent it. When he closed his eyes, he would dream that he was wandering in the sea of work, surrounded by official documents. The more she acted like this, the more everyone guarded against her. They were so scared that even in their dreams, they were afraid. How could she not be worried? Which pregnant woman would react like this? 5 million salted fish's greatest pleasure right now was watching Ginger. Ji was pitting her wits against everyone else for the sake of her job. Digital evolution. If I had the energy of the streamer when I was pregnant, my boss would have been so happy that his teeth would have fallen out. Shan Xingshui Fui Boyuo. It's rare to see a pregnant woman like the streamer. Most women have a hard time during pregnancy, and they lack energy. Edema, obesity, gluttony, these were all normal. If anyone was as energetic as the host when they were pregnant, their figure was not deformed, their belly was not swollen, their skin was so good that even a fly could break its leg if it stood on it, and they were also enthusiastic about their work. It was estimated that it would not be so difficult for women to get a job. Nowadays, women who have not given birth to a second child are far less competitive in the workplace than men who have the ability. Apart from these, there were also many experienced mothers who gave advice to Jiang Xiang. Ji Zhizhao told her what she could and couldn't eat. In short, the first child should be raised according to the book, and the second should be raised according to the pig. Ginger. Ji Yunshu's daughter, Nan, who was carrying a bear's brain, was confused. Then was she considered to be the first or second child? During the 6th month of pregnancy, the weather in the north became a little chilly. Ji woke up one day and suddenly lost interest in work. That day, she was dispirited and had no appetite for anything she ate. She looked so dispirited that it was as if she had lost all attachment to the world. Feng Zhen and the others watched with raised eyebrows. They didn't know what ideas their lord had come up with to torment them again. My lord is not going to the government office today? Ginger. Ji Yunshu waved her hand and said, I'm not going. Just looking at those bamboo slips gives me a headache. I don't want to read a single word of it now. The lord's mood was like a child's face, changing at a whim. Without waiting for Feng Zhen and the others to heave a sigh of relief, thinking that their lord was finally willing to focus on nurturing the fetus, she began to stir up trouble again. Zhang Ping of the woodworking workshop was unjustly implicated. He had to bear the merciless criticism from the crowd. In all honesty, he really wasn't the one who seduced his lord to go to the carpentry workshop. He was also innocent. Who knew why his lord came to the carpentry workshop and refused to leave? She also said that the wood shavings from the wood workshop were extremely delicious. Just by smelling the aroma, one could eat more than 20 bowls of rice. It was too fragrant. Feng Zhen's expression changed involuntarily, as if he had seen a ghost. What do you mean by the smell of sawdust smells good? Would a normal person like sawdust and even want to roll into a pile of sawdust to sleep? With his lord's soft skin and tender flesh, wasn't she afraid that the sawdust would stab her all over in pain? I heard that pregnant women have strange temperaments during pregnancy. My lord's behavior isn't out of line, said a colleague whose wife had given birth to 3 children and was very experienced in pregnancy. The most important thing for a pregnant woman is to be in a good mood. Don't go against her wishes. You must go along with her. Feng Zhen held it in for a long time but couldn't say anything. He wanted to retort. He was the father of 2 children, and he had been by his side both times when his wives were pregnant. How could their pregnancies be so normal? However, he thought that this analogy might offend the lord, so he forced himself to hold it in. The other officials were also silent for a long time. Most of them were in their 30s or 40s and had become fathers long ago. They had at least 2 children and indeed had never encountered such a phenomenon. There was even someone who secretly complained to his close friend. It's not so good to have a female lord. Once she gets pregnant, everyone seems to have become a father for once. Friend versus Ginger. Ji Yunshu was very respectful. When she heard this, her expression changed and she decided to cut ties with this friend. Friends who are disloyal and disrespectful to the ruler should not be made. The official, who had a strong desire to live, added, Lord Jiang only has this child at such a young age, everyone is afraid that she will bump into something. Ever since she announced that she was pregnant, she had not had a good night's sleep. The god who bestowed Lin has not moved, but us officials are trembling with fear. His friend said with a dark expression, even so, you can't say such disrespectful words. If these words were to spread to the ears of outsiders, he was not afraid of being punished. The official said, I have absolutely no disrespect. He was respectful and trembling with fear. Ji Yunshu had been worried since the beginning of her pregnancy. She had to endure the other party's unreasonable pregnancy reaction. Wasn't this like being a father for once? If it was the wife of the family, no matter how uncomfortable she felt in her heart or how uncomfortable she would not torment her husband with such trivial matters. But who was the Lord? If the Lord was in a bad mood, the unlucky ones were the officials. The other party said whatever he had on his mind without any scruples. Therefore, during the period of Ji Yunshu's pregnancy, the officials felt that being a father was even stronger than their own wives' pregnancies. There were even nosy officials who turned to their wives and complained that the Lord was unpredictable, changed her attitude faster than the weather, and had strange hobbies. Unexpectedly, the wives at home rolled their eyes and told them many pregnancy details that made them flabbergasted. What kind of pregnancy hobbies were fanatical about work and wood shavings? There was a lady who liked to pick her feet after she was pregnant, then put her fingers under her nose and sniffed. If she did not smell it, she would vomit and would not be able to eat. However, for the sake of her personal image, when she did this, she had to send away the maids and old women who served her, leaving only 2 confidants. There was a lady who liked to go to the toilet and squat in the pit after she was pregnant. It was said that the smell in the pit was very pleasant, and her dispirited spirit also improved. That lady's husband, no wonder the lady had been locked in her room after she was pregnant and refused to get close to him. Even when they met, she would put on perfume. Also, the lady liked the feeling of farting and liked to nest under the blanket to do so. There was also a lady who had a special hobby. She liked to rub the body mud from the tailbone, collect it bit by bit, and rub it into a big ball. Everyone, looking at their wives' breaths, elegant and graceful, and then thinking about how they looked when they did this, they just wanted to raise their hands to their foreheads. Was there any way to continue living like this? In comparison, it seemed that their lord was more like a normal pregnant woman. She only loved to work and liked carpentry. She did not take off her shoes and pick her feet to smell it, nor did she squat in the pit to smell feces. She did not love to fart, and she did not rub the mud around her son to collect it. Thinking about it this way, it seemed that having such a lord was quite a blessing. Chapter 1805. Zhang Ping and the rest had experimented and explored repeatedly. With Ji's help, they had already made natural rubber that could be used to make solid tires. It was just that this kind of tire was heavier. Ji had only completed half of the bicycle design previously, and was still figuring out the other half. Jiang? Why did Ji suddenly think of the carpentry workshop? Because she suddenly remembered that she had not taken Wei Ci for a ride. A bicycle was needed for a ride, and Zhang Ping and the rest were inefficient, so they had not sent the finished product to her. As the saying went, do it yourself, and you will have everything you need. Ji came to the carpentry workshop to inspect the progress, and was immersed in it, unable to get out. Thanks to this period of contact, Ji found that the development of the carpentry workshop had entered a certain abnormal state. They had accumulated enough experience, and their practical and creative abilities were not low, but the gap was very serious. Other than Zhang Ping and the other two and a few talented craftsmen, the others only knew how to copy, and had no idea why they were doing it, let alone improving it. When she asked Zhang Ping, he thought it was a problem of personal talent. The inheritance of the Mahists had always been difficult, and they had always chosen talented disciples. Those without talent who entered this branch of the Mahists would only be ordinary craftsmen with slightly better skills in the end. Jiang Ji frowned and asked how the Mahists taught their disciples, and this question revealed the crux of the problem. Zhang Ping cautiously asked, "Lord, do you feel that something is wrong?" Everyone said that pregnant women were temperamental, and their Lord was in control of life and death. She could kill when she was angry. Jiang Ji said, "I know what the problem is. Has Shiheng paid attention to the mathematics courses of the students of the Golden Scale Academy?" Zhang Ping said, "I've vaguely heard about it." Jiang Ji communicated with Zhang Ping seriously, "I'll say something you don't like to hear. The Mahists' theory itself is not suitable for the complicated court, but this does not mean that the Mahists are less useful than the Confucians and the legalists. On the contrary, in the way of the people's livelihood, it has a role that the Confucians and the legalists cannot compare. Whether it is the Confucians, the legalists, or the Mahists, descendants are the foundation of inheritance. Without descendants, no matter how amazing the knowledge is, there will be no one to inherit and pass it on. I don't think that the Mahists have high requirements for descendants. I feel that the Mahists have taken a detour on this path, or should I say, the wrong path. I've been observing the carpentry workshop for the past few days and found that many people know what to do according to the blueprints. Their craftsmanship is superb, but when the parts are slightly adjusted, they will mess up. There were many similarities between the manufacturing methods of many things. If he could summarize these similarities, wouldn't he be able to avoid many detours? Can you simplify everything? After listening, Zhang Ping pondered for a long time. He seemed to have grasped something, but he could not grasp the gist of it. He could only ask Jiang for help. Ji, your subject is ignorant. Please clarify further, my lord. Ginger Ji said, for example, in the computational classic of Zhou, Shangao said, fold the rules, hook the 3, cultivate the 4, and the 5. The 9 chapters of arithmetic says, multiply the Pythagorean, and divide it, that is the chord. Between them, other than this example, are there other constant and unchanging rules? I feel that if we can decipher these, or rather, summarize them, the future generations will be able to avoid many detours. Now, the most important thing for the carpentry workshop is not to invent many siege weapons or defense weapons. The world is about to be settled. Their role will also change from attacking the enemy to deterring those thieves in the surrounding countries, so that foreign enemies will not dare to invade the people. However, this does not mean that the carpentry workshop has lost its purpose. It can only turn to research things that are beneficial to the people. I hope that it can continue to develop and go further. I even want to add this knowledge to the textbooks of the Golden Scale Academy so that they can learn it. Experience can only be understood and not explained, but knowledge is different. It is better to memorize than to know nothing. After listening, Zhang Ping was silent for a long time. Occasionally, confusion flashed across his eyes. As for the research on the laws, Ginger Ji originally wanted Zhang Ping and the others to let nature take its course, but she did not expect them to reach a dead end. So, she naturally had to help them. Ginger Ji could only say so much. How much Zhang Ping and the others could comprehend would depend on their own luck. After that, Zhang Ping and Ginger continued to make her bicycle. Ji continued to make her bicycle. The other parts were easy to make, but the most difficult part was the chain. She didn't know what an old-fashioned bicycle looked like, so she listened to the idle spectators and drew a lot of circles. This was also the main reason why Zhang Ping had not finished the bicycle for several months. What was he supposed to do with those messy circles? I wonder if it's Ginger. Ji's resentment was too deep. When she was 8 months old, she found out that the European king of 1,000 years was actually a technical worker at a closed bicycle factory. Coincidentally, the identity of the transmigrator was from the carpentry workshop. When he transmigrated, he was in Jiangxiang. In front of Ji. They looked at each other in dismay. The atmosphere was as silent as honey. I want a bicycle. When a streamer that they had been following for more than 10 years made a request to you, which salted fish could refuse? Not to mention that this salted fish had been unemployed for more than 2 months. Just as he was worrying about how he was going to make a living, he became the lucky king who was chosen. If he did it well, he would immediately become an internet celebrity. Create, create, create. The European king nodded vigorously. He was not a man if he did not build a bicycle. However, the lucky king looked at Jiang. Ji Yunshu's stomach started to tremble. She felt that she couldn't put her hand anywhere. Before the 7th month of pregnancy, Jiang Guoxiang was pregnant. Ji Yunshu's stomach had always been excessively flat. It was even slimmer than an A4 waist and had beautiful abs. 7 months later, her stomach was like a balloon that slowly swelled up. It was a different shape every day. Now that it had been more than 8 months, she finally felt like a pregnant woman about to give birth. The crux of the matter was that they were twins. It was very difficult to carry them to full term. Typically, they would give birth after just 9 months. The lucky king was a little hesitant. If he helped the tyrant build the bicycle, would this big shot ride it with a big belly? In the end, his strong desire to live won over his worry. With his participation, the bicycle went through a series of changes and finally made its grand debut half a month later. Zhang Ping looked at what was said to be a bicycle and was at a loss as to how to use it. It was used as a cart, and it was not stable. After all, it had 2 wheels and not 3 wheels. If he didn't support it, it would fall to the ground. Jiang? Ji Yunshu was excited. I'll teach you how to drive this thing. Salted fish? Zhang Ping. The helping tyrant lucky king, the nightmare had come true. Tout de fait, if I remember correctly, the streamer doesn't know how to ride a bicycle. Jiang? In Ji Yunshu's era, technology was too advanced. How could there be bicycles? Everyone's shared transportation was a maglev car, all right? Jiang? It was true that Ji didn't know how to ride a bicycle, but she had long legs. Even if she didn't know how to ride, she wouldn't fall. Her sense of balance could be slowly found. As one of the best fighters in the Federation, how could she not even be able to handle a bicycle? But, just as she held the handle, her stomach began to ache. The feeling grew stronger and stronger. Jiang? Ji, could this be the old chief's desire to live? Zhang Ping asked carefully, Lord, what's wrong? Jiang? Ji held her stomach with one hand and looked calm. However, what she said made Zhang Ping unable to calm down. Chapter 1806. Go to the delivery room? Why? Zhang Ping was puzzled at first, but he soon froze on the spot. His eyes glanced down stiffly and landed on Jiang Pengji's belly. My lord, are you going to start? Zhang Ping stammered. Only his brain could still move. The rest of his limbs had stopped working. He had forgotten how to use them. Jiang Pengji stroked her belly that seemed to be falling. She frowned and thought for a while. She said uncertainly, should be? What do you mean should be? Zhang Ping was stunned. How could he respond to what his lord had said? Jiang Pengji frowned and said confidently, it's my first time giving birth too. How do I know if this feeling has started? Haven't you been a father for a while? Why don't you have this common sense? Why are you asking me? Hold the bicycle first. I'll take a breather. Zhang Ping took the bicycle in a daze. He had indeed been a father before, but the child did not crawl out of his belly. He knew what was going on, but he had not experienced it firsthand. Fortunately, Zhang Ping was still reliable. After a second, he immediately pushed the bicycle to the maid beside him and hurriedly called for help. "I say, slow down. The child has not been born yet. If you push me too fast, it might fall out halfway." Jiang Pengji did not forget to say some flirtatious words at this time. Her ability to endure pain was unimaginable by ordinary people, so she felt fine at the moment. The others were anxious. Zhang Ping wanted to carry her to the delivery room and hand her over to the midwife. In the end, Zhang Ping did not have the strength to fly. He did not dare to touch Jiang Pengji. He could only bear with his anger and stare at her. She was pregnant with twins. The doctor said that twins were usually born at the end of August or the beginning of September. It was rare for them to survive to full term. In other words, Jiang Pengji, who was in her early 9th month of pregnancy, could give birth at any time. Everything that needed to be prepared was ready at any time. Jiang Pengji's range of activities was also limited to not far from the delivery room. It was very convenient to go there. Zhang Ping looked at his lord, who was said to be giving birth, walking steadily to the delivery room with cold sweat. He had the illusion that his worldview had been refreshed. "Just send it here. Wait for news." Jiang Pengji took a deep breath to relieve the discomfort in her stomach. She waved her hand with her back to Zhang Ping and entered the delivery room with the help of the maid. Zhang Ping. The others also received the news one after another. Except for a few who really couldn't leave their posts, the group of important ministers all arrived. Except for Wei Ci. Of course, everyone's attention was on Zhang Pengji. How could they notice that Wei Ci was missing? "When will the baby be born?" Zhang Ping said, "It hasn't even been 5 minutes since the Lord went in." "No matter how fast he is, he'll have to wait for a few hours, right?" The official was shocked when he heard that. "How many hours? Why is it taking so long?" "Zhang Ping, what kind of tone was that?" It was as if his wife could go in and take a dump and come out. Was giving birth that simple? It was considered fast for the first time to give birth within a few hours. Some women with narrow birth tracts and difficulties in giving birth would need to give birth for a day or two. The next official hurried over, and the first thing he asked was, "Is the young master a man or a woman?" Zhang Ping said, "It hasn't even been 10 minutes since the Lord went in. It hasn't even started yet. How would she know if it's a man or a woman?" The official was stunned. "It's only been the time to brew a cup of tea. Why does it feel like half a day has passed?" Zhang Ping, Fengzhen came over at that moment. Zhang Ping didn't wait for him to speak before saying, "The Lord went in for 10 minutes and hasn't started yet. We don't know if the young master is a man or a woman. If everything goes smoothly, we can see the young master in a few hours. If not, we might have to wait for a day." Fengzhen gave him a baffled look, as if to say, "Aren't you spouting nonsense?" Zhang Ping, he couldn't be angry. Today was his Lord's day. Being angry would ruin her luck. Slowly, more than 30 people gathered in the main hall outside the delivery room. Everyone had different expressions, but no one took the initiative to speak. They waited and waited. After another 10 minutes, someone said in a low voice, "Why isn't there any movement?" As the standard men in the feudal era, their children would wait for the harvest after sowing. Some of the better ones would spend the pregnancy with their wives. Some of the worse ones would just leave the work to them and only care about their children. Even when their wives gave birth, they would wait in the study. Therefore, they only knew that pregnant women would scream in pain during childbirth, but they didn't know the details. They thought that all women went through the same process during childbirth. Maybe it hasn't started yet? Fengzhen also said, "Maybe it's to save energy." Qian Su and Lu Jing sat in the corner. Occasionally, they would look in the direction of the delivery room. Their expressions were similar, but their thoughts were different. He held the blessing of peace in his palm and muttered in a low voice, "I hope the birth goes smoothly and there are no twists and turns." He meant what he said. Jiang Pengji treated Yang Tao and his former subordinates very leniently. If it were another lord, things would be different. The best outcome would be the safety of the mother and child. The worst outcome would be the death of the child. Those with ulterior motives could take the opportunity to spread rumors that Jiang Pengji was not the chosen one by God and that she had cursed Ziwei Star. The worst outcome would be the safety of the child and the mother dying in childbirth. It would be convenient for those with ulterior motives to seize power. The worst outcome would be the death of both mother and child. In that case, such a situation would probably not happen. Those people were ruthless, but they wouldn't want to see the world that had just been stabilized return to war. Lu Zheng said, "It will go smoothly and be safe for all three of us." Qian Su turned to look at him. Lu Zheng was a surrendered official and kept a low profile. She didn't expect him to appear here today. There won't be any accidents. Lu Zheng was certain. Qian Su said, "I hope so." Although she said that, Qian Su was not confident. It was too dangerous for a woman to give birth. Even if there were no external forces plotting against her, it was easy to have a dystocia and hemorrhage. Everyone outside was panicking, but the atmosphere in the delivery room was quite harmonious. The midwives that were originally prepared were not put to use. Or it could be said that Jiang Pengji had someone she trusted more. The midwives became decorations. She entered the delivery room and turned off the live stream. It was said that Weibo had long been prepared and borrowed external servers from a big company. They hoped that Weibo could withstand the wave of traffic attacks. Thinking of that situation, Jiang Pengji couldn't help but laugh again. The servant who was supporting her said, "I've served so many ladies giving birth, but this is the first time I've seen someone enter the delivery room with a smile. Lord Jiang is in good health and will give birth to Lin smoothly. Thank you for your auspicious words." Jiang Pengji's face was very pale, but her smile was still considered relaxed. The production tools of this era were very backward. Women gave birth while lying on the bed or squatting on the ground. The latter was easier to exert force than the former, but only peasant women would do that. Women were in severe pain during childbirth. It was really cruel to make them squat to give birth without relieving their pain. Jiang Pengji had no experience in childbirth, but the salted fish in the 5 million streaming room was not incompetent. Through teaching, she made a delivery bed that could be used for sitting and lying. The design of the delivery bed was convenient to exert force, but the people of this era felt ashamed when they saw it. They didn't understand its use. The midwife looked at it and felt puzzled. Jiang Pengji said, "Go to the side and wait." The midwife? Genius remembered the website address in a second. Mobile version. Chapter 1807. Soon, the midwife understood that she was just a decoration. A man who should never have appeared in the delivery room. Get them to cover their eyes. Don't look at things they shouldn't see. Jiang Pengji's tone was very calm. One could not tell that she was a pregnant woman who was about to give birth. Wei Ci said, "Leave it to me, my lord." The delivery room was cleaned up. Irrelevant people were herded to the cubicle to wait, including the midwife and the doctor. Only the maidservants who were in charge of boiling water could wait outside. They were all watched by special people. Some had ulterior motives and were extremely afraid. Some were baffled but did not dare to object. This doesn't look like the grandeur that Lord Jiang should have when giving birth. Jiang Pengji was still in the mood to joke at this moment. Wei Ci said, "Giving birth doesn't require so many people to move around. Not only is it easy to cause trouble, but it will also give people with ulterior motives an opportunity to take advantage of." Even with experience, Wei Ci was so nervous that his hands were trembling. Many imperial concubines, princes, and princesses were killed in this way in the unofficial history of the palace without anyone knowing. Jiang Pengji was really in pain at this moment. She lay on the delivery bed and looked at her slightly shameful posture of waiting to give birth. She smiled and said to Wei Ci, "I heard that there used to be a man who accidentally saw his wife giving birth. Since then, he has been dispirited and has no interest in treating his wife." Wei Ci said, "I've seen it twice. Have you seen me in such a situation before?" Jiang Pengji was shocked by the bold and unrestrained Wei Ci that day. If it were you on a normal day, you would most likely be so embarrassed that you wouldn't be able to speak. Wei Si sighed and said, "My lord is about to give birth. I have to accept whatever you say and make you happy. This is my duty." A woman's positive emotions were conducive to giving birth. If she was seriously frightened, it might even cause the position of the fetus to be reversed, from a natural birth position to a difficult birth position. Wei Si could not afford to take the risk. If this could make the Lord feel more relaxed, why not let her tease him a little? "Why are you touching my stomach?" After her pregnant belly appeared, she was particularly ticklish. Wei Si's warm fingers touched her stomach, making her want to laugh. Touch the position of the fetus. If it's not in the right position, turn it over before the fetus enters the basin. There's such a method? Wei Si said, "I specially found someone to learn it. I disguised myself and followed them to a few places and learned a thing or two." Jiang Pengji laughed. "Are you going to dress up as a girl?" Wei Si answered patiently, "If I was dressed as a man, they wouldn't have let me in. I'm afraid I would have been beaten out by the host." Cross-dressing. Wei Si? He actually didn't get beaten out? Jiang Pengji scrutinized Wei Si's serious face. She was not surprised. His appearance was exquisite and beautiful. He didn't have the cold and hard edges of a man, but he wasn't as feminine as a woman either. After dressing up a little, applying some makeup and changing into a more voluminous female outfit, one would indeed look like an iconic beauty at first glance. Although they are twins, the positions of the fetuses are very good. After the examination, Wei Si heaved a sigh of relief. The probability of a natural birth of twins was not high. Most of the time, one would die prematurely. Did you experience dystocia because the fetus was in an irregular position? Wei Si said, Her Majesty's body was suffering from a chronic illness. She was entangled with worldly affairs and did not take good care of the fetus. She met with trouble during childbirth. In the end, both mother and daughter were safe. When a woman gave birth, outsiders could not help much. Don't be fooled by the scenes of people giving birth in the TV series. The midwives worked very hard and the maids fetching hot water ran back and forth. If you really went to a modern delivery room to take a look, you would realize that when the delivery room was busy, one midwife had to look after several beds of pregnant women. According to the TV series, the nurses and doctors would be too busy even if they had 3 heads and 6 arms. Wait until the uterus is almost open before exerting force. My lord can save up some strength now. Wei Si used a handkerchief to wipe away the beads of sweat that rolled down her forehead and almost wet her eyelashes so that she wouldn't feel uncomfortable. Then talk to me for a while. Jiang Pengji's ability to endure pain was extremely high, but this body was not original after all. No matter how much pain she could endure, there was an upper limit. What does my lord want to talk about? Jiang Pengji said, Anything is fine. I'm really in pain now. Talk and be distracted. Her pain was really painful. It was not the pain that she used to say when she was acting coquettishly or teasing Wei Si. However, Wei Si could only watch and was unable to share her burden. Jiang Pengji forced a somewhat stiff smile. I want to hear how you like me. The two of them did not make much noise when they spoke. Those who were a distance away could not hear what they said, let alone the people waiting outside the delivery room. Feng Jin and the others waited for more than 2 hours. This was probably the longest they had ever waited for more than 2 hours. Afterwards, when some people recalled it, they could not help but complain that even their wives did not wait for so long when they gave birth. At that moment, no one had the mood to laugh at themselves. There was no movement in the delivery room. Their hearts could only be raised high, with nowhere to rest. Some people could not help but imagine situations such as a hemorrhage and dystocia. The more they thought about it, the more afraid they became. The more they were afraid, the more they could not get rid of the images in their minds. The real situation was very different from what they imagined. Jiang Pengji's delivery was very smooth. Because of her special body, her belly did not really show until 7 months. She did not have too much nutrition during her pregnancy, so the size of the fetus was not big. When Wei Ci said that he could see the baby's head, her body was a little numb from the pain, but she still did as she was told. At that moment, Wei Ci was calm. He steadily helped the baby out of the birth canal with both hands. His actions were agile. Jiang Pengji felt her belly loosen up a little. She asked while sweating profusely, "Is it a boy or a girl?" "It's a girl. It's a girl." Even though Jiang Pengji already knew the answer, she felt that there was a different meaning in asking after going through the procedure. The eldest daughter was small, but her voice was very loud. Her voice could be heard in the main hall outside the delivery room. She cried pitifully. Jiang Pengji, no matter how Wei Ci coaxed her, she did not stop crying. Jiang Pengji waved her hands weakly and said, "Let her cry for a while. She's been wronged." Wei Ci? Jiang Pengji could not tell Wei Ci that her daughter had been kicked into the basin to give birth. Don't think that she could not see the situation in her belly with her mental strength. "Pei Qian, what's wrong with you kicking my daughter? Look at this child crying." The second child was born in the time it took to brew a cup of tea. Her crying was a little weak, and her voice was childish. She pulled the daughter's leg and fixed her eyes on her. "She's also a girl." Wei Ci panicked at first, but after taking a closer look at the appearance of the two children, he breathed a sigh of relief. They were not quite the same. That was safe. Jiang Pengji could not help but roll her eyes. Fraternal twins were not identical. Wasn't it normal for them to look different? Unbeknownst to her, Wei Ci had worried about these two children for a long time. There was a period of time when he dreamed of two identical children standing in front of him. They kept asking him to distinguish who was the eldest and who was the second. If he guessed wrongly, they would have to leave. "Have you named them?" Wei Ci said, "There are a few." "Do you want to continue using the name Jiang Yan?" "Don't. Otherwise, it's unfair to both of them." Jiang Pengji was silent for a while. "Lin Lang, one Jiang Lin, one Jiang Lang." Wei Ci? "Is the Lord sure you want to trick your youngest daughter like this? The character Lang has a good meaning, but do you still remember your surname, my lord?" "Jiang Lang, Jiang Lang, Jiang Lang has run out of ideas? Why don't we each name one?" Chapter 1808. Most of the words beside the word "you" had good connotations. They could be chosen as names, but they could not be named so casually. They had to go through the process. Jiang Pengji asked, "Must it be you?" Wei Ci did not know why it had to be you. Jiang Yan's name was chosen by drawing lots. Wei Tsong came with his sister. The third and fourth children should follow this naming custom. Otherwise, it would seem a little unconventional. Even people with obsessive-compulsive disorder could not stand it. Jiang Pengji said, "Since there is no convention, let's change it." Wei Ci's brows twitched. He had a bad feeling. For example? Zhua. What about Jiang Zhua? When Wei Ci heard the word, he could not think of which Zhua it was. Jiang Pengji continued, "The word Zhua is a blessing. It has the meaning of protection and also the meaning of the throne." Wei Ci was almost shocked. The child was born less than an hour ago, but he was given the Zhua of the Zhua. He was worried that if the blessing was too great, it would harm the child. Jiang Pengji did not care about Wei Ci's worries. She felt that the word Zhua was as arrogant as the halo on her daughter's head. The name Jiang Zhua doesn't sound good. Wei Ci thought for a while and suggested, "How about Lian?" "Lian?" Wei Ci said, "Lian is a vessel used to hold food during sacrifices in ancient times. It also has the intention of inheriting the ancestral weapon. She is regarded as the heir." Compared to being careless and arrogant, holding up the child to tell the world that she was the heir to the throne, it was better to be more subtle. Whether it was Jiang Lian or Wei Ci, he hoped that she would be steady, honest, and broad-minded. Not only would she inherit the ancestral weapon, but she would also be responsible for the national weapon. Jiang Pengji pondered for a long time. In the end, she had no choice but to choose Lian as the child's name. Although she also had the intention of treating her as the heir, she expressed it in a more tactful way. It was somewhat vague. The third child's name was decided. As for the fourth child's name, to be honest, Jiang Pengji did not want to waste her brain cells. In the end, she simply used a shortcut. Call her Jiang Yan. When Wei Ci heard the name, he was stunned. Didn't the Lord say that you don't need yen? The beauty on the jade wall is called yen. What I'm talking about is the stone is like jade. When Wei Ci heard this, he frowned. He did not know if it was an illusion, but he felt that his lord did not like younger daughters. A stone that resembled jade was, in the end, a stone and not a beautiful jade. It only had the appearance, but no substance. Wei Ci was not satisfied, and he clearly expressed his dissatisfaction. Jiang Pengji did not know how to explain to Wei Ci that he only had 3 children in his 2 lives and that his youngest daughter was an impostor. She looked down at the baby girl in her arms. The little girl's eyes were closed, and her breathing was steady and slow. She was extremely obedient. That's Jiang Yan, the Yan who is known as Yan because of her beauty. Jiang Pengji looked like she was going to argue with him. Wei Ci thought about it and nodded in agreement. To him, his eldest daughter was also Jiang Yan, and his youngest daughter was also Jiang Yan. Having the same name did not mean that they were the same person. Wei Ci would not mix them up. But he couldn't let his youngest daughter carry the name Bai, especially with his eldest daughter, Lian, as a foil. Who knew what those despicable people would say? 2 twin children, one in front of the other in the time it took to drink a cup of tea, but their futures were as different as heaven and earth. Not only their futures, but even their names made it clear that the 2 were different. It really hurt his youngest daughter's heart. Wei Ci did not want his youngest daughter to get hurt, nor did he want the relationship between his lord and the little prince to drift apart because of this. Little did he know, relationship between mother and daughter? It was impossible. It was impossible in this lifetime. Jiang Pengji was worried that when he grew up, he would beat her until he called her daddy. Therefore, she wanted to take advantage of him smiley face angle, when his wings hardened. Jiang Pengji's health was very good. Even though she had gone through a labor, she could now pack up and carry the child out. Since the child's first cry, everyone had been waiting anxiously for the young lord to come out. In the end, after waiting and waiting, there was still no movement from the delivery room. It couldn't be. Could something have happened to the lord? Feng Zhen and the others' hearts suddenly jumped to their throats. They wanted to send someone to inquire, but it was impossible. Finally, they saw their lord, who looked tired but still in good spirits, come out with 2 children in each of her arms. Everyone? In their impression, women were so weak after giving birth that they couldn't move, but their lord could still carry 2 children out at the same time. What a godly person. Despite their complaints, everyone still bowed down and congratulated her in unison. Congratulations, my lord, on the birth of Lin, Jiang Pengji said, the eldest daughter is Jiang Lian, and the second daughter is Jiang Yan. Twins? Hearing that the 2 children were of the same gender, a few observant officials frowned. Children who looked the same were not suitable to be the heir, unless one was gone or they had another child. Jiang Pengji did not have time to care about what they were thinking. She let the children's wet nurses carry them and sat on the mats on each side, accepting everyone's greetings. Not far away, the people in the front row could clearly see the children's faces. Upon closer inspection, they did not look alike. Seeing this, they breathed a sigh of relief. At this moment, no one asked for a snub and suggested that Jiang Pengji give birth to a boy to inherit the throne. Why? The halo on Princess Lian's head was too dazzling. She was Ziwei, a gift from the heavens. Who could defeat the incarnation of Ziwei the Great who came to the world? Of course, there were also people who hoped that the male heir would inherit the throne, but they did not dare to say it out loud for fear of incurring the wrath of the heavens. For now, they would take things one step at a time. If Princess Lien and Princess Yen were not qualified enough to inherit the throne, they would persuade the Lord to give birth to another child in the future. They could not hand over the throne to a mediocre heir, and the heir was a woman. The storm passed like this for the time being. Jiang Pengji also began to be pressured into confinement. Confinement isn't scientific at all. My body is very healthy. Do you believe that I can overturn 10 Fu Wangs? She had to lie in bed for a month without washing her hair or bathing. She could only wipe herself with hot water. It was unbearable. Wei Xi advised her to bear with it so that she would not suffer from confinement sickness. If she was really bored, she could play with the children. The twins were much smaller than the single babies. They lay in the swaddling clothes like a small ball. Their skin was bright red, and their facial features were wrinkled. They looked like little monkeys that had been shaved. However, Jiang Pengji did not say this metaphor out loud. Otherwise, Wei Xi would nag at her about how inauspicious it was. They're so ugly. What's so fun about them? How are they going to meet people in the future? Jiang Pengji did not hide her disdain. Oh, it was only limited to the younger daughter. The older daughter was definitely cute. The servant with a clean identity said, "Don't worry, Lord Jiang. The two princes are very handsome. You can see it when they're 1 month old. Children changed every day. After a while, they would be cute and beautiful. It doesn't matter if they're ugly. They can't get married anyway. Just kidnap whoever you like." The clothes that the two children wore, the diapers that they used, the milk bottles and milk powder that they drank from, were all prepared by the old chief. She was probably the only person in the world who would buy such things for herself. How does it feel to be a baby? She used her fingertips to scratch the sole of the younger daughter's foot. The other party lazily opened her eyes and moved them away slowly. I heard that babies can only see a few dozen centimeters. How did you know I was in this direction? The younger daughter used her fist to fend off Jiang Pengji's harassment. She couldn't hear if she couldn't see clearly. She wasn't deaf. After a while, a hand stroked her butt. Because of this action, the sticky and uncomfortable but became even more uncomfortable. It's a little smelly. The diaper seems to be full. Do you want me to help you change it? The old chief was speechless. Chapter 1809. She couldn't fast forward, she could never fast forward. She could only tease the old chief now so that she wouldn't suffer losses in the future. Jiang Pengji was on the verge of being beaten to death. Her routine was to play with her daughter in the morning, work in the afternoon, and sleep at night. The poor baby's sleeping schedule was different from Jiang Pengji's. When the latter was energetic, they slept soundly. The eldest, Jiang Lian, only knew how to eat, drink, and sleep. She wouldn't cry when she was bullied. She just pouted and had a quiet personality. The second child was different. Jiang Pengji could still play with her at first, but she would resist later. For example, Jiang Pengji would play with her like a hooligan. When her face got close, she would kick her nose. Jiang Pengji slyly said, "Ouch, is the milk powder not weak enough? You don't have much strength in your kick. Are you tickling me?" The second child looked at Jiang Pengji faintly, like the gaze of the Grim Reaper. Since the birth of the twins, Jiang Pengji's status in the streaming room had plummeted. She was the big pig trotter Jiang, in their mouth, while the two little kids were Princess Lien and Princess Yen. The second child also became the new queen's meme pack because of her and Jiang Pengji's intimidating gaze. Tutu Feichio, my Princess Yan's gaze is too sharp. This is the aura of a queen. She doesn't need a big gold chain, sunglasses, and cigars to exude a strong aura that belongs to a big boss. Princess Lien is a fairy-like soft girl. She's so cute and I want to hug her. Sans Hisongshu snacking, looking at the two princes, I want to have babies every day. But thinking that the princes are someone else's fairy baby, I'm not so tempted. If I want to have such a high-quality baby, I have to find a male god of the same quality as Beauty Ci. Liangping Puzi snacking, the person above is also narcissistic. Do you think you can compete with Big Pig Trotter Jiang? To have a cute and smart baby like the princes, you must first be comparable to Big Pig Trotter Jiang. The man must be a male god of the same level as Wei Ci. Lan Yamoshu Kaiwa. Speaking of this, a few days ago, I saw a birthing video. It shamelessly violated the prince's portrait rights and used them as the video material. I was so angry that I made a report and continued to make a report. Wanshan Ji, I'm already imagining the gentle and soft Princess Lian and the big boss Princess Yan in a decade or so. How powerful. Looking at the bullet screen, Jiang Pengji could not help but be speechless and choke as the salted fish unanimously categorized their boss, Jiang Lian, as a soft girl. Did they misunderstand the education of old Jiang's family? Soft girl? Impossible. No matter how soft she looked on the outside, she was still black and white on the inside. How could she be a soft girl? Moreover, with the old chief as a younger sister, Jiang Pengji was worried that her eldest daughter would be too domineering in the future. As it turned out, Jiang Pengji's worries were not unfounded. The two children were twins. In the eyes of outsiders, their bodies were not as strong as single babies. Therefore, the third bath was not a big event. It was just a small gesture. After a month of growth, the two children had become as cute and delightful as white jade. Of course, the full moon banquet had to be grand. At the same time, this was also the first time the two children officially met the world. Feng Zhen and the others looked at the different but equally cute and healthy princes. Their hearts melted. Someone said that when Princess Lian was born, her cries were as loud as thunder. He knew she was extraordinary when he heard it. Now that he saw her, she was indeed full of nobility. Jiang Lian was the eldest daughter. She also had a meaningful name like Lian. Everyone knew Jiang Pengji's attitude. In comparison, the second daughter, Jiang Yan, received much less attention. She did not like to hear such things. One after another, they flattered her incessantly. It was only because the eldest was not sensible. If she knew, she would be half dead from all the flattery. Unruly people, who touched my milk bottle? The old chief's eyes suddenly became sharp. He held the milk bottle with one hand and held it with both hands. His gaze was like a knife. Feng Zhen retracted his hand in embarrassment. He was just curious about the transparent bottle and what was inside. The bottle was filled with a milky white liquid. It did not smell fishy like a wet nurse's. Instead, it was sweet and had a nice smell. Seeing Princess Yan's small mouth nibble on the bottle, Feng Zhen could not restrain his curiosity. He wanted to know what milk it was, so he stretched out his sinful claws. He looked around and saw that no one was paying attention. He quickly pulled out the old chief's milk bottle, squeezed some into his wine cup, and returned the bottle to its owner. Feng Zhen thought he had done it without anyone noticing. He did not know that the owner of the milk bottle's eyes had become extremely dangerous. Feng Zhen tasted it and said, "It's not as sweet as I imagined, but it is indeed very fragrant." The old chief was speechless. A bastard who stole a baby's food for a month. Jiang Pengji only had this many people under her command? As he thought about it, the old chief's drinking speed increased. Who knew how long this 1-month banquet would take? If Feng Zhen stole her milk again, wouldn't Jiang Pengji laugh at her? Ridicule her for being a good-for-nothing who could not even protect her own food? She drank too enthusiastically and neglected the difference between a baby's body and an adult's. Not long after, she felt a familiar feeling of fullness in her stomach. She was full. She threw the milk bottle aside and reached out to Feng Zhen for a hug. Unruly people, help me burp. Feng Zhen was also a man who had 2 sons. He knew that babies needed to burp when they were full, so he did not refuse. "Thank you for your love, Your Highness." When the old chief patted his face, Fengzhen thought that the child was trying to get close to him. The old chief was speechless. "No, I just want to hit you, you shameless old man, who stole my food." The old chief was deeply aware of how inconvenient a baby's body was. It didn't take long for him to feel sleepy. Perhaps it was because they were twins, the two children did everything in sync. One was sleepy, and the other was almost as sleepy. However, the old chief still did not fall asleep, because she was awakened by a commotion. It happened a few minutes ago. Although the main characters of the one-month banquet were the two young princes, the people eating, drinking, and laughing were the adults. The young prince was sleepy and wanted to go to sleep. As adults, they continued to drink and have fun, pushing the atmosphere of the banquet to the highest point. At that moment, a sudden rush of footsteps came from outside. A messenger with a black panda flag on his back ran out of the hall unimpeded. In the process, he even stumbled and fell. In order to ensure the speed of communication, the messenger who delivered important information would have a conspicuous flag on his back. The color of the flag was the same as the grade of the military report. The black color was an important urgent letter. Anyone who saw the symbol and tried to stop him would be killed without mercy. That was why the messenger was able to arrive outside the palace unimpeded. He did not wait for his breath to catch his breath. He took out an urgent letter with a black panda seal on it. "Report, there is an urgent report from the front line. Please read it, my lord." Information? At this time? Everyone was worried after hearing this. An urgent report with a black seal was either good news or bad news. The former was good news, while the latter was a bad omen. They had not heard of any changes at the front line recently. Why would they choose a full moon day to send an urgent report 800 miles away? Could it be that someone was taking advantage of this day to secretly attack the Lord? Everyone had different thoughts. Only Jiang Pengji was calm. Good news and bad news. It was such a good day, yet he brought bad luck to her. She wanted to flip over the 18 generations of her ancestors' graves. Chapter 18:10. Bring it here. If it was a blessing, it wasn't a curse. If it was a curse, it couldn't be avoided. Even if it was bad news, Jiang Pengji did not intend to hide it. What auspicious omens or ominous omens? It was just a matter of her mouth. Even if it was an ominous sign, she could still lead her troops to kill the person who created the ominous sign and caused her trouble. The hall that was bustling with people toasting and exchanging toasts was now completely silent. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop on the floor. Jiang Pengji tore open the battle report and read it quickly. Her expression did not change at all, and the people below could not guess whether it was good news or bad news. It would be fine if it was good news, but if it was bad news, many people would be implicated. Not only will Her Highness's identity be questioned by the world, but those who fail to do their job will also be held accountable. If it's a light punishment, one person will lose his life, and if it's a heavy punishment, his entire family will have to pay. At that moment, the important ministers who were still outside were almost all veterans who had accompanied Jiang Pengji all the way. It was inappropriate to attack any of them. However, it was even more inappropriate to not make a move, as it would not be able to appease the people outside. If the crisis of public opinion was not handled well, the prestige that Jiang Pengji had painstakingly built up over the years would collapse. I don't know what happened. They thought of all the possible scenarios. For example, the Nanxing aristocrats rebelling. For example, the citizens of the northern borderline were unwilling to be integrated. For example, Qiguan Rang, who had previously been in the limelight, had failed to lead his troops. Half of Zhongzhao's territory, which he had spent a great deal of manpower to conquer, was gone. A few people in the banquet revealed faint sneers. Qiguan Rang's identity was the most controversial among Jiang Pengji's subordinates. Yang Si, the son of a prostitute, had a pure bloodline, but Qiguan Rang was a bastard with mixed blood. How many people were gnashing their teeth in jealousy for a bastard of humble birth to climb so high? Just the thought of serving in the same court as this kind of eccentric and sinister person made them somewhat unhappy. He had thought that Qi Guanrang would fall from grace, but he had almost become a god in one fell swoop. He had conquered half of the country in just over 20 days. Even if it was not all his credit, he had participated in it and was one of the main planners who had planned everything. The light that fell on him was not weak. Of course, there were people who were jealous, and there were also people who were worried that Qi Guanrang would promote a large number of people from the northern borderline in the future to compete with them. In just a few breaths of time, countless thoughts flashed through their minds. They thought of all kinds of possibilities, but they couldn't guess the truth. Jiang Pengji took a deep breath and slowly put down the urgent report in her hand. She glanced at the people in the hall. Those who were swept by her gaze subconsciously sat up straight. They were afraid that they would become Jiang Pengji's punching bag if they behaved inappropriately. After a long while, a silence that was as long as death by 1,000 cuts, Jiang Pengji slowly opened her mouth. "Everyone, I have something to tell you." When everyone heard this, they knew that the real show was about to begin. Continue to recuperate next year. Everyone? They were all prepared to welcome the storm. Did the Lord build up the atmosphere for so long just to say this? Continue to recuperate next year? Zhongzhao was not fighting anymore. Wenjing offers the other half of Zhongzhao to congratulate the young lord on his birthday. Those who have surrendered and those who refuse to surrender will be escorted by heavy troops. They will arrive in Wanzhou in at most 7 days. Jiang Pengji held up the battle report from the front line. Zhongzhao is already in our hands. Unfortunately, this place has suffered years of war and the people's lives are in dire straits. It's really not suitable for us to fight again. Therefore, Wenjing's letter suggests that we continue to recruit troops, train our elites, and soothe the people's pain of separation. The year after, we will conquer Beiyuan and Xichang in one fell swoop. Does anyone have any objections to this arrangement? Qi Guanrang had originally wanted to take Zhongzhao as a birthday gift. Unfortunately, things had gone awry. He, who had always had a smooth sailing life, was plotted against and was almost killed by the troops. Old Ginger was spicier. After Qi Guanrang escaped, he counterattacked. Both the enemy and himself were completely enraged. It was either you or I who died. In the end, Qi Guanrang's luck prevailed. Old Man Sun's reinforcements arrived in time to outflank the enemy. Along the way, some feudal vassals surrendered tactfully, while others would rather die than surrender. In the end, they were all tied up and sent to Wanzhou. Only one feudal vassal was different. They wanted to surrender, but Old Man Sun wouldn't let them. Someone advised the old man not to kill those who surrendered. The old man, who had always been easy to talk to, swore. No one could stop him. It turned out that this family's surname was Nie. It was the Nie family of Zhongzhao that was struggling at death's door and had played their cards badly. Old Man Sun still knew how to look at the big picture. He didn't exterminate the Nie family. He only wanted the Nie family to hand over the culprit who had killed his son, as well as the culprit's father, mother, and children. I lost my beloved wife and son, and my grandson lost his parents because of this person. The parents of such a disregard for the lives of innocent people should be killed. Kill his parents, kill his children. Let him have a taste of helplessness, pain, and being unable to resist. Sun Wen could still escape Dongqing with his grandson, Sun Lan, and come back many years later for revenge. The idiot in front of him only knew how to kneel and beg for mercy. He was worse than a stray dog. When Old Man Sun personally killed his father, mother, and 5 legitimate children in front of that person, the scene was silent. No one dared to stop him. The only person who could stop him was Qi Guanrang. Not only did he not stop him, but he also wanted to personally hand Old Man Sun his sword. Someone said that the old man was too cruel and cold-blooded. He didn't even spare a child. Qi Guanrang couldn't help but sneer. When these people sympathized with the weak, did they ever think that Old Man Sun was the real victim and the weak? He only wanted to become stronger and seek revenge on the people who had harmed him. Revenge for revenge, revenge for revenge. The dust had settled in Zhongzhou, but Qi Guanrang couldn't be happy. He wanted to send a big gift on the young lord's birthday, but the time was wrong. Old man's son said, even if there's no birthday gift, there's a 1-month gift. At the very least, there's a 1-year-old gift. Thus, this letter was delivered to him. The messenger ran all the way, and a few horses died. Like a relay, it was finally delivered when the banquet was about to end. Qiguan Rang's generous gift undoubtedly made the halo on Jiang Lian's head shine even brighter. Yes, it was so bright that it could blind people's eyes. The old chief silently held the bottle and sucked on it. His fair face had the vicissitudes of an adult. Serves you right for kicking my daughter. Otherwise, this extravagance would have been yours. Even the male lead of the main heroine didn't have Wenjing. He tried his best to conquer a country just to celebrate her birth. The old chief rolled his eyes at Jiang Pengji and didn't reply. Of course, she couldn't speak even if she wanted to. The baby's body didn't support this function. Babies grew very fast. They looked different every day. Babies who weren't even 1-year-old were at their most adorable. Twins were even more rare. Everyone thought that Princess Lian was quiet and steady, while Princess Yen was lively and active. In the end, Princess Lian used her strength to prove that she was like her mother, while Princess Yen used her, as steady as Mount Tai, lazily to show what it meant to be motionless. Chapter 18:11. As the saying goes, tumble, sit, roll, crawl, and walk. It referred to the important stages that children under 1-year-old went through. Of course, it was noted that these were normal children. Some children would develop earlier or later, but it didn't matter. Jiang Pengji never thought that early development and late development would appear in the twins at the same time. Princess Lian had only cried once since birth. Even when her diapers were full of urine or feces, she would only frown and look at the people who appeared in her line of sight with teary eyes. She was quiet and didn't cry or make a fuss. She was so cute that she could melt people into a puddle of water. On the contrary, the younger twin sister, Princess Yen, was much more domineering. She had the aura of a baby boss written all over her body. As the two brats grew older, their personalities seemed to have changed. The originally quiet and soft sister became a little tyrant who would feel uncomfortable if she didn't move for a while the baby boss remained as lazy as a mountain. Therefore, Princess Lian, who had just turned 9 months old, could often be seen swaying from one end of the corridor to the other. The servant woman who was serving her wanted to help her, but her adorable smiling face drooped down and was replaced with a fierce expression. She mumbled something and refused vaguely. The servant woman didn't dare to refuse. She could only bite the bullet and follow behind her. Princess Lian's range of activity expanded from the original baby room to the corridor, then from the corridor to the small courtyard. To make it easier for her to move, the original flowers and decorative hills in the small courtyard were moved away. The pebbled path was also paved with neat wooden boards. The edges and corners were wrapped with soft, thick cloth to prevent her from bumping into anything. With a larger range of activity, she also wanted to try to evolve from walking to running. The results were expected. The little baby's legs were weak. It was already difficult for her to stand firmly and walk, let alone run. After running 2 steps, her knees gave way and she rolled forward. When she fell for the first time, she felt very wronged. Her little face, which always wore a smile, was stifled and tears welled up in her eyes. Just as she was about to cry, her younger sister took a pacifier out of nowhere and put it in her mouth. The pacifier was stained with the eldest brother's favorite milk, which had a slight sweetness to it. Once the pacifier was in her mouth, she subconsciously cheered and forgot to cry. Seeing that the eldest brother was quiet, the second brother accurately pulled the pacifier out of her mouth and put it in his own mouth. Her teeth weren't even fully grown yet, and she would always drool when she slept. It would be better to put a pacifier on her. How could the old commander accept being surrounded by so many people while drooling in his sleep? Such a dark history did not exist. Boss, who was in the middle of kicking, fortunately, she also had her own pacifier. When the serving maid saw the situation, she brought her pacifier over. Only then did the first prince regain his composure. After playing with the pacifier for a while, she seemed to have gained endless strength from it. She skillfully propped herself up with her 2 hands and slowly stood up. He watched as the whole afternoon went by in an endless loop of walk quickly, jog, fall down, want to cry, put a pacifier to comfort her, recover her energy and continue to walk, jog again, fall down again. Until he ran out of energy and hugged the old general to sleep. The old general didn't move much for the entire afternoon. Other than putting pacifiers into Boss's mouth, he spent the rest of his time lying in various positions and looking at Boss. When the boss insisted on hugging her to sleep, the old general would suck on his pacifier without moving an inch. The only time he was willing to take the initiative to get up was, she tilted her glasses and gave the servant woman who was taking care of her a "Bayubiu" look. The servant woman had been taking care of her for a few months. She had long understood the meaning behind the little prince's various looks, raised eyebrows, and various small expressions. She carefully picked up the dirty first prince from the side of the little prince. The little prince stood up steadily and didn't need anyone's help to walk to the toilet cubicle. The toilet was also a small size. After using it, there would be someone to clean and spray deodorant, so there was no need to worry that the smell would stink her. Although she couldn't walk steadily, the old general's pride supported her to complete the arduous task of going to the toilet alone. She didn't want to be carried to the toilet like Boss. As a self-respecting baby, she refused to have anything that violated her privacy, such as the evil open crotch pants. Of course, she still needed someone else to help her with things like bathing. After solving her physical needs, the old general went back to his sleeping place and lay down to think about life. The twins beside him seemed to have sensed it. They closed their eyes and rolled on the ground. After a while, they hugged the old general with both hands and feet. Tisk, little brats from the Jiang family. The old general accepted the baby's closeness. It was rare that he didn't push her away. She was similar to Jiang Pengji in terms of liking babies. The more they couldn't get something, the more they wanted it. Jiang Pengji had never caught a fish in her life. The old general was no different. He had killed so much that his murderous aura seeped into his soul. He didn't like small animals that were sensitive to smell the most. Her Highness Lian liked her and was close to her, so the old general was happy to treat her like a daughter. Of course, it would be great if the baby didn't bite her face or press half of her body on top of her in her dreams. The baby wasn't heavy, but the old general, who was also a baby, felt a little uncomfortable under the weight. Smiley face angle, about 10 months later, Boss, who could run 2 steps steadily without falling, discovered a new hobby. She wanted to walk and run hand in hand with her sister. The old commander sternly rejected the proposal. However, an adult couldn't understand a baby's stubbornness. She wouldn't give up until she found a new hobby. The old general turned over lazily and didn't look at the baby's pitiful and expectant face. Seeing this, Boss got up and walked to the other side to sit down. He raised his hand and patted the old general's shoulder. The old general rolled his eyes and continued to turn over. Just like that, they tossed and turned for 2 hours, until the boss was sleepy and yawning. Her stamina was exhausted smiley face angle, and she couldn't fight anymore. The old general only needed to turn over while lying down, but she had to repeat the action of getting up, walking, sitting, and getting up again. Naturally, she was more exhausted. Seeing that his persistent sister had finally given up, the old general secretly heaved a sigh of relief. She really didn't want to turn over and over like a pancake. Smiley face angle, boss covered her small mouth and yawned twice. Suddenly, her small ears trembled and she became energetic as if she had been injected with chicken blood. Scare. The boss pointed at the door and shouted. After a while, footsteps approached. Wei Ci, who was dressed in a lake blue scholar's robe, appeared against the sunlight. Boss got up and ran to Wei Ci. She was a few steps away when her knees gave way and she almost fell. Wei Ci reached out and caught her steadily, then bowed respectfully. Your subject, Wei Ci, greets your highness. Boss said. Scare. The female servant stepped forward and bowed to Wei Ci with a respectful expression. She carried the two princes to change into a set of clean clothes. Sir, why are you here so early today? While they were waiting, the female official serving the two princes greeted Wei Ci. There weren't many trivial matters. I came after I was done. My lord has entrusted the important task of teaching your highness to me. I dare not disappoint her. I can only do my best to repay her, Wei Ci said with a smile. How are the two of you doing today? Chapter 18:12. The maid briefly described the interaction between the eldest and the second. Wei Ci smiled as he listened. He was a little glad that this was a twin. The children grew up together and accompanied each other. Even if their parents were busy and neglected them, they would not be too lonely or sad. From the time the children were 4 months old, there was a maid who read books beside them and showed them the commonly used words. When they were 10 months old, Wei Ci would come over to teach for 2 hours every afternoon as a teacher. Others thought that the children were too young to understand anything, but Wei Ci knew that they had a very good memory. Even if they did not understand, they could leave some impression in their minds. It would be much easier for them to learn in the future. Wei Ci sat on the seat in the west wing. The two cushions below were side by side for the two princes. The servant women carried the children over and placed them on the cushions. The old chief nodded. The eldest pointed at Wei Ci and smiled. Hey. Others did not know what hey meant. They thought that it was a nickname given to Wei Ci by the eldest. Only the old chief knew. Jiang Pengji once called Wei Ci Zixiao. The eldest, who had just woken up, heard it. But she could not pronounce the word Zixiao. She settled for hey. Wei Ci formally bowed to the two of them and began the day's lecture. In an ordinary family, it would be good if the two 10-month-old children could sit still without crying or making a fuss. The two princes' reactions were very magical. They sat quietly without crying or making a fuss. Their serious expressions made it seem as if they could really understand. Smiley face angle, except for the old chief, the other real baby could not possibly understand. She only inherited her mother's love for beauty and had a natural liking for Wei Ci. The beautiful person sat not far away and spoke softly. Even if she could not understand a word, she could be quiet for the whole afternoon. Soon, 2 hours passed. The old chief could still listen with his head nodding. The other one had already fallen into a sweet dream and was sleeping soundly. Wei Ci put down the beginner's book in his hand. He got up and carried the eldest in his arms. His posture was very standard. He did not disturb the eldest. Your Highness Yan, let me carry you back to your room to rest. Wei Ci smiled and asked for the child's opinion. The old chief was a movie king with max acting skills. Of course, he could not show that he understood. He just nodded his head sleepily. Wei Ci took it that she had agreed and carefully picked up the two babies. Although he was the child's teacher, he was still an outsider. Whatever he did, he had to be under the watchful eyes of the female officials and servants. He put down the child and got up to leave. Before he left, he told the maid what Her Highness needed to review. The female official noted them down one by one before Wei Ci left. After Wei Ci left, the young female official sighed with emotion. Sir Wei treats the two young princes very well. He was usually very busy with work, but he could still take 2 hours out of his busy schedule to teach his child, rain or shine. Even a biological father couldn't do this. The maidservant said, there are many people who treat Her Highness well. As a subject under the Lord, isn't this what he should do? Only Qiguan Rang, who had offered the country of Zhongzhou as a gift a year ago, would have applauded. To be able to go this far as a subject and a ruler, the word good could no longer be used to describe their relationship. The assistant realized that she had made a slip of the tongue and quickly thought of a remedy. The old general, who was still in a daze, could not help but pout. Wasn't he her biological father? By the time Jiang Pengji returned, the two princes were almost asleep. Liang Liang, Princess Lian opened her sleepy eyes and sniffed Jiang Pengji. She took the initiative to reach out for a hug. Have you been good today? Look at how badly you slept. Your cheeks are covered in marks and saliva. Jiang Pengji hugged her eldest daughter and coaxed her. At that moment, the old general got up and rubbed his eyes. The maidservant brought a basin of warm water to wash the two princes' faces and wash away their sleepiness. Are you hungry? I'll get someone to serve you your meals. This was directed at the second son. The first son understood but did not know how to express himself. It was much easier for the old general to communicate. Of course I'm hungry. The old general opened his half-awake eyes and yawned to wake up a little. The two children had a special table made according to their size and height. Because they did not know how to use chopsticks, they used a special wooden spoon. It was light and easy to hold. The twins' table was on the left and right side, and the food on the plates was the same. The old general held the spoon steadily. Even though his hand would sometimes shake and stain his nose, 99% of the food went into his stomach. The eldest son's performance was not as outstanding. Even so, she would try her best to use the spoon. If she could not eat, she would bury her face in the basin _ smiley face angle, _ the maidservant could only stare at her with heartache. She did not dare to help. Which child born to a wealthy family did not have dozens of servants serving them meticulously? Let's not talk about children over 10 months old eating by themselves. Even the teenage Lang Jun and his wife had to be fed by the maidservants. Not to mention the fact that they had to bury their faces in the basin if they could not eat their fill. Lord Jiang was too harsh on the children. Of course, these thoughts could only be buried in their hearts. They did not even dare to say a word in their dreams. Eating a meal was like fighting a war. Jiang Pengji took a handkerchief and wiped the food off the children's faces. When it was the second son's turn, he coldly refused. The real boss never let people wipe their mouths, just like how she never turned around to look at the explosion when she caused trouble. You are my daughter now. You don't have to be so cold. The old general was indifferent. The servants are used to judging people. You are not the eldest daughter. If you refuse to interact with me, what if the servants neglect you? The old general could not help but roll his eyes. If the servants forgot their duties and stepped on the young master because the eldest did not value them, wouldn't that reflect the incompetence of the eldest? Such nonsense could be used in novels to shirk responsibility from the parents of the weak, but it would not work if it was used to deceive her. Jiang Pengji had no choice but to use her trump card. I want to know, where did the spiritual body in the god-slaying saber go? The old general who was wiping his face elegantly paused. His chubby baby face stiffened. Jiang Pengji smiled and rubbed the old general's ears. The soft ears felt as good as her eldest daughter's. Good girl, what should you call me? The old general thought about it and threw away the handkerchief. He reached out to Jiang Pengji for kisses, hugs, and kisses. Jiang Pengji took the opportunity to carry her and whispered in her ear. Is that all you have? Using Z to threaten me is the same as me using Wei Ci to threaten you one day. You are both shameless. The conversation between the mother and daughter was very soft. Even if others saw it, they would only think that the mother and daughter were intimate. They did not know that their eyes were full of sparks. In a while, I will personally lead the army to attack the North Yuan. I will leave Lian in your care. Perform well. Jiang Pengji patted the baby's plump butt, which made him glare angrily. Why didn't you bring him along? Zixiao will not follow the army this time. He wants to stay and take care of you. Jiang Pengji smiled. If I bring him along, will the enemy take the bait? The old general sneered. I understand. Chapter 1813. Before Jiang Pengji led the troops to battle, something was put on the agenda. She only remembered it when Wei Ci reminded her, Beiyuan and Xichang were not strong enough, and the world situation was set. There seemed to be no difference whether Jiang Pengji ascended to the throne now or after destroying the two countries. So, the question was, where should the capital be located? Regarding the capital, isn't it too early to think about it now? Jiang Pengji was not familiar with these operations, so she naturally did not understand and had no concept. In her opinion, ascending to the throne meant worshipping the heavens and the earth, announcing to the world that she had ascended to the throne, and that she would have to address her as Her Majesty in the future. She thought it was very simple, but in fact, there were many things to prepare in advance, such as the location of the capital. Wei Ci said, "It's not early. If you ascend to the throne, you will start preparing for the construction of the imperial mausoleum after the first year." Jiang Pengji? She had just ascended to the throne, and she was already sending people to build the imperial mausoleum for her? Wei Ci asked with a smile, "Do you think that the imperial mausoleum was built urgently by the emperor?" Jiang Pengji thought about the specifications of the imperial mausoleum described in the history books and was silent. Not to mention the construction standards of this era, even hundreds of years later, it might not be possible to build an imperial mausoleum that met the specifications in a few months. Generally speaking, the imperial mausoleum of the emperor was built soon after ascending to the throne. From the design of the imperial mausoleum, the preparation of materials, the manpower. These were all projects that consumed a lot of resources and money. If the construction was fast enough, it could be completed 2 or 3 years before the emperor's death. It was impossible to make a last-minute effort. The imperial mausoleum was already like this. The capital could not be developed slowly after ascending to the throne, right? Jiang Pengji was speechless and finally slacked off. This question is indeed. Where is the capital of the Jiang dynasty in your previous life? Can't it be decided where it will be in this life? Wei Ci sighed. He knew that the main leader would say that. In my previous life, the capital was really a child's play. Even when the world was stable and the people's lives were stable, there were still ministers who suggested moving the capital. It could not be helped, the emperor was too capricious, and the location of the capital was chosen with his eyes closed. In the 10th year of the Jiang dynasty, because the officials in the upper reaches were corrupt, the capital in the middle and lower reaches was flooded for 3 days. Although the flood control was timely and not too many lives were lost, the fertile fields of the people in the suburbs near the capital were flooded, and a year's harvest was destroyed. His Majesty's imperial palace was also soaked in water for 2 days. During those days, the officials went to work in fear and trepidation, dripping water to go to court. If this matter were to spread, it would be shameful. The capital of a country was flooded for 3 days because of a corrupt official. Fortunately, His Majesty's throne was as stable as Mount Tai, and the various crises were handled appropriately, so it did not cause any unrest in the court. Her Highness Jiang Yan's performance in this disaster relief was excellent, and she had completely caught the eyes of the courtiers. In the end, His Majesty finally agreed to move the capital. At the same time, all the officials upstream were to be investigated and held accountable, leaving no one alive. The common people even joked that the blood of the corrupt officials and their family members had dyed the upper reaches red. From this, it could be seen how many people had died in that accident. Wei Ci felt that it was a little troublesome to decide on the capital twice. It would be better to choose an imperial capital that everyone was satisfied with from the beginning and slowly build it into a place that was more prosperous than Wanzhou. With the experience of building Wanzhou, it wouldn't be that difficult to build an imperial capital. Even if they couldn't rush out before the Lord ascended to the throne, they could at least move to the new palace within 2 or 3 years after ascending to the throne, right? Jiang Pengji was speechless. Although it was to choose a location for the capital, Jiang Pengji was a reserved person. She couldn't say it out loud, so she used a euphemistic excuse. All of them were her old partners. What did their lord not know about peeing? However, the location of the capital was indeed very important. Not only would it affect the continuation of the entire dynasty, but it would also affect the local economy. The location couldn't be randomly decided either. It had to ensure that the capital was easy to defend and difficult to attack, and it also had to ensure that the transportation here was developed to facilitate the development of the economy. At the same time, they had to take into account the control of the imperial capital's troops in various parts of the border. In short, at this time, they needed a charlatan who knew how to survey the dragon's veins. This person proposed to build the capital on the former site of the imperial capital of Zhongzhou. This was the ancient capital of the 6 dynasties, and all the conditions were in line with everyone's expectations. But there were also people who expressed strong objections. What did the ancient capital of the 6 dynasties mean? It meant that 6 of the countries that had built their capitals here had perished. Why? Did they want to gather together and give someone a gift? Gather all 7 dragon balls and summon the dragon god? It was inauspicious, too inauspicious. So, that person recommended the land near his ancestral home _ smiley face angle, _ not to mention anything else. If the location was successfully decided, the price of land and housing would skyrocket. Jiang Pengji sat at the head of the table and listened to their debate. She deeply suspected that these people had bought a lot of houses in those places. Of course, this was just Jiang Pengji's teasing. Apart from Wanzhou, there were no other places where housing prices could really skyrocket. The construction of the capital of a country wasn't a day's work. Although Wanzhou was very prosperous now, no less than any capital in history, it had taken countless people more than 10 years of hard work to build it to its current state. If they chose a barren place to build the capital, it would consume a lot of money and manpower. Jiang Pengji couldn't afford it. In terms of national defense and finance, there weren't many places that Jiang Pengji could choose from. It was best to choose an ancient capital with natural defenses, a construction foundation, and a place where there were tens of thousands of troops stationed nearby. After several rounds of intense discussion and voting, they finally decided on Ping and Fengdu in Sun Prefecture, which was slightly north of Zhongzhou. Most of Zhongzhou's 10 prefectures and 33 counties were rich and fertile. The prefectures and prefectures of the various prefectures and prefectures were also once overflowing with wealth. Sun Prefecture's Ping and Fengdu were once the capital of some small country during the chaotic era of the 16 kingdoms. If Jiang Pengji decided to set the capital there, it would look like a capital city in 2 or 3 years. To truly develop their economy, they would have to take their time after moving in. Sooner or later, they would surpass Wanzhou. If it wasn't for the fact that Wanzhou wasn't suitable to be the imperial capital, Jiang Pengji really didn't want to move. After deciding on Ping and Fengdu, everyone said that the name had to be changed. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Aren't you asking for too much? It sounds good to me. A few insiders muttered to themselves. It was one thing for their lord to be terrible at naming, but she was also obsessed with the aesthetics of names. Ping and Fengdu were fine, but Fengdu was in big trouble. Where was Plentiful City? Fengdu was also known as Fengdu. According to myths and legends, it was the entrance to the netherworld, the place where people went after death. How could the son of heaven and the son of hell live in the same place with the same name? We can't find someone to discuss with the emperor of Fengdu and ask him to change his name, right? So, the plan that everyone gave was to change the name, to change it to an auspicious name. Oh, there was no need to adopt the Lord's suggestion. The name of the imperial capital was to be recorded in the annals of history. They didn't want to make a dark history and be mocked by future generations. Jiang Pengji was speechless. Chapter 1814. In the previous life, the capital was finally moved to Pingfengdu, right? Jiang Pengji asked Wei Ci. The latter had maintained a sweet smile since the meeting ended, which made her very unhappy. Wei Ci said, everything has its own arrangement. Pingfengdu's terrain is coherent and the dragon's vein is complete. It is indeed a treasured place. In the previous life, the ministers were also noisy and finally decided on Pingfengdu. The unlucky Pingfengdu did not escape the fate of changing its name in this life. Jiang Pengji took a deep breath. Zixiao, you've changed. You've become somewhat mischievous. Could it be that all men who became fathers would evolve in this direction? Wei Ci was well versed in pacifying people. He sighed and said, I'm reluctant to leave you on the expedition. It will be another year or two. Although Wei Ci's mischievous interest had nothing to do with her expedition, Jiang Pengji still liked to hear him say that. Her heart warmed. But, if Wei Ci knew what she had done, he would probably be heartbroken. Jiang Pengji raised her arms and circled his neck. The two of them hugged each other quietly in the deserted corridor. The setting sun shone on them, casting an intimate silhouette. Jiang Pengji took a deep breath and suppressed the slight guilt in her heart. Her perplexity was swept away, and there was only determination left in her eyes. If I go on an expedition, are you really not willing to go to other places? There is a shortage of people everywhere. Are you really willing to waste your precious time in the rear? Jiang Pengji did not request Wei Ci not to follow the army this time. It was his own request because his child was in the rear and he had to take care of it. This reminded her of what the salted fishes once said. She earned money outside to support her family while Wei Ci took care of everything in the rear like a good wife and mother. Smiley face angle, in reality, the chief butler was actually Su Ku. However, Wei Ci's sacrifice was no less than Su Ku's. There were only a few years left in the war. It was equivalent to him giving up on the literary examination at the last moment. Wen Zheng and Old Man's Son relied on their previous military achievements and their valiant achievements in Zhongzhou. Their points were firmly in the top 3. If there were no accidents, their ranking was stable. After that, the competition was fierce. Wei Ci once told her that he would recall the literary examination after his rebirth, but now he chose to give up. Jiang Pengji was touched, but she did not want Wei Ci to make sacrifices and give in to his career for her and their child. After all, she wasn't a man in the salted fish plain who needed his wife to sacrifice her job to take care of the family. Wei Ci said, this is not a waste. The most important thing is to take good care of the two princes. Jiang Pengji looked straight into Wei Ci's eyes. Under the glow of the setting sun, she felt that the man in front of her seemed to have sensed what she wanted to do, which was why he insisted on staying. But, how was this possible? Jiang Pengji could not help but laugh. She buried these thoughts deep in her heart. When she was analyzing sincerity with Wei Ci in the past, she did reveal the existence of the main body of the system, but she only mentioned it briefly. According to Wei Ci's understanding, the system itself was a powerful existence, but it had yet to surpass the limits of humans. If Wei Ci knew that this thing was close to the gods that he knew, he would be very worried. How would he be as ignorant as he was now? Did Wei Ci really not feel anything? He was naturally aware of it. After all, he was the person who had slept with him for 2 lifetimes. How could he not be aware of it? However, he didn't know what she wanted to do, so he could only try his best to help her achieve what she wanted. In this aspect, he and Qiguan Rang were the same. It was just that the latter was high profile, while he was low-key and introverted. Wei Ci was used to the other party's arrangement of grass snakes, gray lines, and thousands of miles of veins. He reviewed his experience after his rebirth several times and more or less discovered that something was wrong. Wanzhou was probably a dangerous place second only to the front lines. His 2 daughters were still here. How could he leave? Qiguan Rang had helped her recover Zhongzhou. He also hoped to assist her in eradicating the great threat in her heart. But, he only hoped that it was not that person. Otherwise, the Lord would probably feel terrible. The family ate together. Jiang Pengji dismissed the servants. Only then did Wei Ci dare to approach his daughter. Although it was said to be intimate, in fact, he still maintained a certain distance between the ruler and the minister. He did not dare to forget his identity for even a moment. The Lord doesn't let the maids serve you meals. After all, Her Highness Lien is young. Her Highness Yen eats steadily, but she also needs to be taken care of. Jiang Pengji said, you haven't even fed me one mouthful at a time. What right do you have to let these 2 little ones take the lead? The old chief's hand that was holding the wooden spoon paused. He faintly rolled his eyes at Jiang Pengji. The boss didn't understand their flirtatious words, but she did. Couldn't they consider her feelings before flirting and driving? Not only was it not enough to eat, but she was also being fed dog food? Wei Ci smiled helplessly. He carried Her Highness Lien in his arms and sat on his knees. Wow, the boss liked Wei Ci the most. If the other maids wanted to touch her, they had to get permission. Wei Ci was an exception. Jiang Pengji realized that her daughter was really obsessed with appearances. When Wei Ci was feeding her, she ate 1.5 times more than usual. The boss pointed at the porridge and said, "I want this time." Wei Ci used a small fan to fan the porridge in the wooden spoon until it was warm enough for her to eat. After the meal, the boss ate until her belly was round. On the contrary, Wei Ci left without taking 2 bites. The old chief looked at the blushing boss and said coldly, "Do you want to change the plan?" "Why?" The old chief said, "Wei Ci most likely knows that I'm not his daughter." At first, Wei Ci quite liked to hug the old chief, but he didn't know when he started to keep a fixed distance. The distance wasn't the distance between a ruler and an official, but between a man and a woman. Jiang Pengji said, "Explain it after it's over. If you tell him now, you'll be harming him." The old chief glanced at her. "You'll have to be single sooner or later." How could this kind of trash be single? Did you Lao forget to wear his reading glasses when he tied the rope? I have nothing to fear from being favored. Zixiao understands my difficulties, and I'm grateful for his understanding and understanding. How can you understand this kind of tacit understanding that doesn't require verbal communication? Jiang Pengji's words were quite provocative. She changed the topic and said in a tone as if she was saying her last words, "Chief, I'll leave Zixiao to you." Jiang Pengji's tone suddenly became serious. The old chief couldn't refute her solemn expression. "Your daughter wants me to protect, and so does your husband. What about you?" Jiang Pengji said with a face full of vicissitudes, "Only one of us can live. Zixiao and the child can only be safe if the system loses. I originally prepared for the worst, such as the death of the whole family, but the old chief gave me a new idea. It was time for everyone to reveal their trump cards in this round of poker. Whoever won or lost depended on what happened next." Jiang Pengji sacrificed herself, Wei Ci, the 2 children, and even the destiny of the country. If she still couldn't bait out the system and get rid of it in one fell swoop, her trump card would really be gone. The Federation probably also considered this point, so they arranged for the old chief to back her up. If she was finished, wouldn't the old chief come out to finish her off? "So, you've even schemed against me." Jiang Pengji smiled and said, "It's just this once. I'm seriously entrusting my life to you." Either Jiang Pengji would turn the tables, or she would be overturned by the sky's brain. As her pace of unifying the world quickened, the sky's brain became more and more impatient. After plotting for more than 10 years and feigning civility for more than 10 years, she had enough. Chapter 1815. Wenzheng. Jiang Pengji led 100,000 troops to the north and met up with Qiguan Rang, who had set off earlier. When the ruler and his minister, who had not seen each other for nearly 3 years, saw each other, the salted fish in the streaming room silently spammed the cold couple. Even though Jiang Pengji and Qiguan Rang were destined to be together, the fans of the couple still insisted on picking up sweets from them. They were so stubborn that it made people feel sad. Jiang Pengji was not in the mood to see the salted fish holding up the evil cult flag. She hurriedly dismounted from her horse and helped Qiguan Rang, who had been waiting for her outside Shui City early in the morning. She glanced at Qiguan Rang's exposed hands, which were red from the cold, and could not help but blame him for not taking care of himself. Qiguan Rang smiled and said, "When I heard that my lord had arrived with troops today, I was overjoyed. How could I care about these things?" Feng Zhen and Li Yun also rushed over on horseback. They felt that their lord was getting more capricious as she got older. Jiang Pengji said, "I originally wanted you to lead the troops to Xichang. The weather there is better. I heard that people only wear autumn clothes in this season, but you had to invite troops to attack Beiyuan. Are you not satisfied with attacking Zhongzhou yet? Must you come to Beiyuan to cause trouble and cripple your body? Her words were not very polite, but those who knew her could tell that she said this because she was concerned about Qiguanrang. The geography and climate of Beiyuan were completely different from Zhongzhou. There were 5 countries in the world, each with a wide terrain and different climate. Zhongzhou had the largest area, the most fertile land, and the most powerful national power. It had always been in existence that the other 4 countries coveted but dared not touch. North Abyss was different. North Abyss was a big place, but it was really poor. It was a cold, poor, and bitter place. Winter was long and spring and summer were short. Its terrain was even more northerly than Beizhou, the northern borderline. Its people were tough but ignorant and backward. Jiang Pengji could not bear for Qiguanrang to come here to suffer. It was better to assist Fu Wang and Meng Hun in killing the people in Xichang. Although Xichang was a chaotic place, the climate was warm and mild. It was a good place to recuperate while fighting and accumulating military merits. Qiguanrang's attack on Zhongzhou ended in failure. He was tricked by the enemy. Although he counterattacked beautifully, he also suffered arrow wounds in his thigh and arm. If he did not take good care of these 2 areas, he would suffer when he grew old and became cold the day after. In comparison, Old Man's son gave her a lot less trouble. At first, the old man had wanted to ask for permission, but Jiang Pengji had left him in Zhongzhou's Bianzhou to be the magistrate. On the surface, it seemed like she wanted him to be in charge of all matters in Bianzhou and restore the war-ravaged Bianzhou to its former glory. In reality, she wanted the old man to rest there for a while. She was worried that Grandpa's son would misunderstand, so she wrote a long private letter to express her concern for his health. Old Man's son looked at the secret letter for a long time, then carefully put it away, planning to pass it down as a family heirloom. The secret letter written by the number 1 female star emperor, who was cold to outsiders and talkative to insiders, was qualified to be a family heirloom. Old Man's son had always paid attention to his health. It was not difficult for Jiang Pengji to persuade him, but Qiguanrang was different. Too desperate. If Qiguanrang was still the young man in his 20s, Jiang Pengji would have let him do whatever he wanted. What about now? He was already past 40. In this era, this age was considered the end of middle age. Jiang Pengji wanted him to rest. If there was a war, he should go to Xichang to fight, but he refused. He had to ask for permission to come to Beiyuan, and he wrote letters more than once. She could not refute him too many times, lest her subordinates think that Qiguanrang had lost his loyalty. In the end, she agreed. He was reprimanded as soon as they met. Qiguanrang was already mentally prepared. He nodded repeatedly and said yes. He did not retort. He knew his lord. She was a standard person who could be persuaded by reason but not cowed by force. At this time, she could not bear to say more. As expected, Jiang Pengji changed the topic after saying a few words. She asked about the training of the troops and horses, as well as the preparation of rations. Qiguanrang had rehearsed these questions countless times. He answered whatever she asked. He covered all aspects and was thorough in every aspect. Jiang Pengji and he entered the city one after the other. The bullet screens on the screen became even more vigorous. Sans Hisongshu snacking, I've fallen in love with a cold couple. I'm destined to be. Today, the officials are giving out candy. Even though there are glass shards, I'll still eat it. Liangpin Puzi snacking, smiley face angle, this is the first time I've thought about supporting an NPC. The streamer seems to be compatible with anyone. Bike away snacking, I remember that a while ago, there was a guru on Bilibili who edited a personality-changing story about palace intrigue. It perfectly fulfilled the needs of all the streamers. The editing of that video was too crazy. All the concubines were scheming against each other, the immortals were fighting, all kinds of blackening, all kinds of reversals, and all kinds of designs made me want to kneel on my knees. Fortunately, the Emperor is our streamer. Otherwise, who would be able to tame these little demons? Tudu Fecho, I watched that video. Big Boss Wenjing fought all the way until he was stabbed to death by the blackened Zixiao. *CK the plot. I'm too handsome. #kneel and cry. That video was really awesome. My heart trembles when I see Zixiao smile now. Beauty CI is so gentle, elegant, a gentleman, open and aboveboard, and broad-minded. How could he be so blackened? It's a nightmare. Gui Kai Guofengxiao, isn't the real nightmare when the blackened Zixiao is finally poisoned to death by the emperor? All the love is AF** king drama. My heart hurts when I watch it. Now I have psychological trauma when I watch the live stream. Why don't we use Jianchun, who edited the video, to suppress the emperor and sacrifice him to heaven? You can even think of such a crazy idea of having everyone be killed. Newspaper office. Jiang Pengji and Qiguan Rang had just understood the situation in Beiyuan. When she raised her head and glanced at the bullet screen, she could not keep up with everyone's topic again. After all, she was a veteran streamer who had been streaming conscientiously for more than 10 years. Why did they blacken her like this? My lord, are you unhappy? Jiang Pengji gulped down a glass of warm wine and warmed herself with the strong alcohol. Beiyuan killed itself and almost gave me the country for free. Why should I be unhappy? Although she said so, there was no trace of joy on her face. Qiguan Rang knew that his lord was unhappy in her heart. To be honest, Beiyuan was too poor. Qiguan Rang could not think of how much fat could be squeezed out of this country. Sending 250,000 troops to attack was already giving them face. Have the winter clothes for the soldiers been distributed? Although it was said so, the 5 countries in the world were born as one. No matter how poor Beiyuan was, it could not be separated. It had to be recovered. All of them have been distributed. That's good. Have a good winter. Let the soldiers practice more and familiarize themselves with this terrible weather. If it were not for the fact that this war had to be fought, Jiang Pengji really could not bear to let her soldiers come here to suffer in the cold. After Jiang Pengji arrived, she was busy for 2 days. On the 3rd day, everything was on track. At this time, the scouts found hundreds of suspicious people. They arrested all of them and waited for Jiang Pengji to deal with them. After investigating, Fengzhen reported, the people who fled from Beiyuan said that they could not survive. They hope that my lord can take them in. Jiang Pengji smiled and said, fled? There are people seeking refuge with me when the war is about to start. Is the royal family of Beiyuan so unpopular? Fengzhen evaluated indifferently. The royal family of Beiyuan is just a group of puppets who are manipulated and have no control over themselves. How can they unite the people? You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.